Hi everybody, it's JJ and we're back again for another ASUS PCDIY hardware live stream. Hopefully everybody is having a good Friday. Hopefully everybody's staying cool. It's getting pretty hot, I think, in most places. For us, I think we're breaking 100 again today. I think we're going to have a high of something like 106, 107 or something like that. So hopefully everybody is staying cool, staying safe and staying healthy and enjoying their Friday, and hopefully going to have a great weekend. Here we've got actually quite a number of new products to be able to talk about. We've actually got two brand new TUF Gaming monitors. We've got a new high refresh rate 1080p gaming monitor, a new TUF Gaming high refresh rate 1440p monitor. Both those I think are going to hit a really nice price point in terms of if you're looking to finally step up to either one of those in terms of a newer monitor that's featuring a higher refresh rate for 1080p or 1440p. We've of course got the update and just kind of the recap of the new versions of the 4060 Ti with essentially the increased VRAM, so the 16GB models. We won't really touch on those too much. You can check out the prior stream, which goes into more information on the kind of the features, function, the design elements of those, but we'll touch quickly at least on the models that we'll have available in that lineup. Essentially essentially a follow-up to the TUF Gaming OG 4090, which is essentially our more compact but still cool, quiet, and very performant 4090 TUF Gaming based graphics card. And we're also going to touch on a very cool update to an IP collaboration that I know many of you have been excited about. And then, of course, your guys' questions, comments, feedback, and the PCDIY Builder Spotlight. And I think also maybe a few BIOS updates that we've got for this week. So overall, let's see who we have joining us for the stream. Erica, fantastic. Thanks so much for letting us know that the audio is sounding good. Hope you're doing great. We've got, let's see, Snef is joining us as always, the one, the only, the Canadian Grandmaster from up north. We've got Miguel joining us also on the stream. H2O Computers joining us. We've got Michael joining us. We've got Josue joining us as well. We've got Tech joining us as well on the stream, and also Michael joining us. Fantastic. So happy to have you, man. Fantastic to have you guys joining us on the stream. So let's get ready to go ahead and jump straight into it. I think I'm going to go ahead and kick it off before I get into the UEFI BIOS announcements with something that I know a lot of you have been excited about. So if some of you may be aware, in the past, ASUS has done a number of IP collaborations. This means that we work essentially with a company to be able to leverage one of their great IPs and be able to integrate them in a really interesting and dynamic way when it comes to our product portfolio. We've done this with everything from Assassin's Creed to Call of Duty to Gundam to ROG Evangelion to Demon Slayer, and now we're really excited to give you guys just a little bit of a teaser of essentially the next IP collaboration, and that's going to be with our Wave 2 of ROG Evangelion. So I'm very excited to just show you guys a quick teaser of this. I think for those of you who've probably been already part of the PCDIY community, you guys of course saw the little bit of the teaser video that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and show that off for you guys. You guys can go ahead and take a little bit of a look at what we're going to be having coming in the not too distant future. So let's go ahead and take a look at it right here and see what we got going on. All right. Overall, feeling the vibes. I'm feeling the vibes. It's looking pretty good. Oh, that was about it. Not too much there, but pretty excited. So you guys can, of course, check out our featured announcement post that we have, of course, in the PCDIY group, and we're very excited about it. I think it's going to be pretty sweet, pretty exciting, and we're very, very excited, of course, to be able to continue this collaboration. I think it's going to be very, very cool. So for those of you that are interested in, of course, finding out about this upcoming collaboration, one of the best places to be able to find out about all the ins and outs is going to be the ASUS PCDIY group. That's a community that we have with over 45,000 members. Great space to be able to find out about the latest and greatest from ASUS. If you're looking for build information, you're looking for insights, tips, tricks, whatever it might be, great space to be able to talk about all things PCDIY, and definitely where you'll be able to find out about a lot more of our upcoming collaboration in this respect. Facebook user notes as it goes, working on one of those collaborations would be a dream. I love modding, and a theme makes it even better. Yeah, it's been really exciting, I think, for me as a fan, of course, of anime, but also, of course, as ROG and ASUS. Really, we offer an innovative and performant and high quality design when it comes to our components. It's really exciting to be able to see these amazing collaborations, and I know that what we did in the prior generations were really, really well received. I know a lot of users that absolutely loved the anime-based collaborations that we had, whether they were in Demon Slayer, whether it was the Gundam, or whether it was the first wave that we had with Evangelion. So really excited about it. Just make sure to go ahead and keep it tuned, and you'll find out much more in the not too distant future. And I'll give you guys a little bit of some information. If you guys are going to be attending LTX, you may find out about some more information there. So just make sure to keep it tuned to the PCDIY stream, to our social channels, and of course to that PCDIY group, and you'll be finding out about much more when it comes to that respect, right? All right, guys, so that's just a little bit of a teaser right there. Next up, as always, let's go ahead and touch on our UEFI BIOS announcements. For this week, there's not too many actually new UEFI BIOS releases. Let me go ahead and check my list right here. This is pretty much just supplementary to already the releases that we've been having for the last couple of weeks that have predominantly been for AM4, although we have had a mixture, especially over the last 2 to 3 weeks, for a couple of other series of motherboards, including Socket 1700, where we saw newer MAI firmware, as well as new UEFI BIOSes for Z690, Z790. There was actually also an MEI and security update that was also, I think, for Z590 series, but for AM4 platforms, so things like X570, B550, there's actually been a new kind of broad AGISA rollout that's been coming out, and we're now finally kind of at the tail end for the vast majority of boards that pretty much have this new AGISA. So again, for just kind of reference, let me go ahead and show you what that looks like if some of you are interested. I will have a featured announcement post that will denote all this information. I'm going to go ahead and use a pretty popular model that we have when it comes to this, which is going to be the TUF Gaming X570 Plus, which was one that recently got the update as of the 17th, so a little bit earlier this week. When I do these UEFI BIOS recaps, they're usually in a 7 to 10 day kind of period, so that means that pretty much any of the new updates that I feature in the announcement post is going to be from boards within essentially that last 7 to 10 day period. Okay, and you can see right here that AGISA build is 1.2.0.A. Again, AM4 is very mature at this standpoint. It's not critical. If you're already running with stability, reliability, you've got no issues, there's really no reason to. So really I would focus this at users that might be building right now a system, or maybe they've recently built a system and they haven't yet updated their UEFI. Keep in mind that especially upgrading to newer AGISAs can change boosting behavior. You may want to reinstall your chipset drivers and your graphics drivers after the fact. And one of the key reasons why we saw, especially within the last portion of the year, essentially these new UEFI BIOS release for the AM4 platform was to help to improve over interoperability and compatibility when it came to USB functionality and interoperability and compatibility. So if you are maybe experiencing some type of issue, maybe intermittently in that regard, that could be a reason to update. But otherwise, again, if your system is running stable and reliable without any issues, no reason to make any changes in that respect. And as always, too, keep in mind that when you have an overclock configuration, if you make an update to a UEFI, because there can be changes in the auto rules, you can actually have a different experience between one build to another. So ideally, you always want to kind of go stock to stock when you're making a comparison in relation to stability and overall functionality in the experience. And when you're talking about overclocking, you may need to actually redefine your overclock specific to that new UEFI release. All right, guys, that takes care of that UEFI release. I'll quickly just note some of the models that are there, but there wasn't really that many models. So that's going to be TUF Gaming X570 Plus, the Pro, both the TUF Gaming Pro original, so version 1, and then the version 2. And then also we had an update for the X570 X670E Creator Wi-Fi board, some H610 boards, and then also our mini PCs. If you've got a mini PC PN63, PN53, PN51, or PN50, some of those mini PCs also saw UEFI BIOS updates. Again, if you want to confirm on your board, of course, you can always just go to the service and support site, but if you want to check our feature update list, there's a featured post announcement that we'll have in our PCDIY group that lists all the models and then a corresponding FAQ. So you can check that out for more information. All right. Hey, we've got another user joining us. How you doing, man? Happy to have you here in the stream. Thanks so much. And Dual Master, you're, I believe, asking in relation, will you do it with AMD when it comes to, I'm assuming you're talking about our collaboration. I can't give you any information as of right now. Just make sure to keep it tuned. We will have, of course, more information when it comes to what we're going to be doing for limited edition components or our collaborations as we're actually ready to put these out onto the market. So just make sure to go ahead and follow us in terms of the PCDIY group, or like I said, make sure to check out forthcoming future PCDIY streams and you'll find out about all that information. Okay. All right, guys. So that takes care of our UEFI BIOS announcements. All right. Next up, let's see here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and I think that I've got a giveaway that I want to go ahead and highlight. So give me 1 second right here, guys. Yes. I believe it's got a little bit of time left, so we'll go ahead and bring this up. Yeah, here we go. All right. So in terms of giveaways, guys, we do have a couple of giveaways that are getting very towards the end. So I just want to go ahead and replug these. So right here, you can see that we have our extendable router giveaway. So if you guys are essentially not familiar of what an extendable router is, that's a naming convention that we've come up with internally for pretty much almost all of our ASUS routers. I like to coin our routers not as an extendable router, but as actually a smart router. And the reason being is that they really contain a huge level of functionality beyond what you would traditionally think of just a router for basic kind of wired connection or wireless connectivity. A lot of this is afforded through the rich firmware options that we have that allow you to do things like running a VPN directly on the router, having advanced parental controls, built-in actually automated technologies to protect and safeguard your network from things like different forms of like hijackers or like certain types of bots, and then even advanced options like what we call deep packet inspection analysis, which actually allows you to have like a really cool pie chart of the way the bandwidth is utilized across all your devices on the network. network. So if you're wondering, hey, how much is my camera using versus, my smart, fridge versus, my phone, my router, my gaming console, any connected devices, you can actually see all that information in a nice pie graph chart and lets you know actually how much information is being utilized. The extendable portion is specifically in relation to the fact that we have a technology that's really been a cornerstone of ASUS Wi-Fi routers, which has been our AI mesh technology, meaning that you can essentially pair another ASUS router with that router to be able to go ahead and create a mesh network, so that if you want to be able to have even broader and more stable Wi-Fi coverage, you can do that. And literally the ecosystem of models that we have that are interoperable and compatible with each other, it's over 30 models. So it's a very deep model set, and exists in pretty much across all price points. We have literally models that go all the way down to about $100 to, of course, our flagship, tri-band and quad band routers, which of course get above $500 in terms of their overall price point. So here, this just gives you a little bit of information about that. We do have actually a pretty big prize pool that we have right here. So you can see first prize is actually going to be an ASUS ZenBook 14 OLED laptop, which is pretty sweet. Ultra thin light laptop, performant, great battery life, and a beautiful display in terms of an OLED display that's on there. We're then actually going to be giving away 10 of one of my favorite routers that we have in our lineup, the AX86U Pro. It's got multi-gigabit WAN support. It's a very performant router in terms of its overall range and its speed. It's got a 64-bit high-performance SoC chipset, high-speed DDR memory, really solid unit. We then have the AX57 router, which we're giving 20 of those away. So in total, just between the AX60U Pro and the AX57, that's 30 routers that we're going to be giving away. So all you need to do to get in on the opportunity is just head over to the little applet and get in on it. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat for you guys, and if you haven't gotten in on it, hopefully go ahead and get in on it. All right, so give me 1 second to go ahead and drop that in there for you. Hey, Michael. So in terms of your question, do we have any plans to work on more GPUs? I can't comment on what we may or may not be working on in terms of that. Intel, is a key partner for us. They're a cornerstone partner. We're very active in working with them across a wide range of products, right? Whether it's, of course, on motherboards, whether it's in laptops, whether, of course, it's in servers and workstations, and many other actually initiatives that we worked with them comprehensively really over our 30-year history. So we're going to continue to really have an outstanding relationship with them in terms of technologies, feature, design, and many other initiatives that we'll work with, but I can't comment as far as whether or not you're going to see any future products from us specifically in terms of what you're talking about from like a graphics card solution. As of right now, we have two great product portfolios that are driven by AMD or NVIDIA based GPUs, and that's what you're going to continue to see from us. All right. Okay. So I think beyond that, let me go ahead and see if we've got anything else here. I do also want to go ahead and highlight, we've also got a giveaway that is currently going on with our friends over at NVIDIA. So with NVIDIA, you essentially have the opportunity that if you want to be able to pick up essentially a graphics card, it's pretty sweet. All you got to do is essentially pretty much do a retweet. So let me go ahead and open this one up right here, and I'll show you guys here. Give me 1 second. And it should be right over here. I had it open. And where's that link? The link has escaped me. All right, here we go. I found it, guys. All right, so yep. Pretty much right here, guys. So I will go ahead and drop this link in the chat, but you pretty much just have to like the post and comment, and you have the opportunity to pick up an ASUS ROG STRIX 4060 base graphics card. It's a beautiful card. Of course, ultra cool, ultra quiet. It's our flagship series within that 4060 model, right, where we have other models from 4060, such as we have the Pro Art, we have the Dual. So if you're looking to be able to just win a graphics card, all you got to do is just comment and like the post. So pretty straightforward. So that's being driven over by our friends over at NVIDIA. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat for that one. So give me 1 second. All right, so there we go. All right, so beyond that, let's go ahead and go into now some of our new products that we have going on, guys. Before I get into some of those new products, I do want to go ahead and just do a little bit of a subtle, it's not so much like a teaser, but just I guess a little bit of a preview of a upcoming product that we're going to have. So if you guys are part of our PCDIY group, you guys know I already previously highlighted our ASUS W680 ACE. And for many of you, you're probably already aware in terms of our kind of motherboard lineup that we offer a wide range of different, of course, motherboards, right? So we've got everything in terms of our gaming life series, which is going to be TUF Gaming, ROG Strix, and then ROG, which can be ROG Maximus or ROG Crosshair, right? We then also do have our Prime series, and we also have our ProArt series. So traditionally people think just 5 series, but we actually have our WS series. Our WS series is one of our oldest series of motherboards. Actually, it's even older than our ROG series when it comes to actually it being one of our series or lineup of motherboards. And then we actually also have our CSM, which CSM generally kind of crosses over sometimes with kind of WS. It's Workstation specifically is what WS means, and then CSM is our corporate stable model, which can actually go across quite a number of different segments of the market. But the WS series is really kind of interesting because for a long time it existed as kind of an enthusiast option. We even saw a lot of kind of overclockers and gamers adopt this model. But over, probably the last decade, right, we've seen a transition to probably more of them shift to either standard models or shift over to kind of some of the dedicated gaming models. And we've maintained a WS portfolio, and really the strength of the WS portfolio historically has been support for more complex option ROMs. So option ROMs are going to be the firmware that's on specialized devices like certain add-in cards, multi-gigabit Ethernet adapters, complex HBAs, so storage controllers, many specialized devices that sometimes when you put them on a motherboard, the motherboard can have more issues initializing those type of devices. And so we have to specially validate kind of the board and the firmware to be able to work with those devices. There can be also factors like supporting Xeon CPUs, ECC memory, also generally a focus on more kind of robust connectivity and storage or out-of-band management, which means you can kind of remote monitor and manage the motherboard. And so this is an ATX model that we already have. It supports both 12 and 13th gen series CPUs. Some of the cool things that it has is it has, of course, your traditional high-speed connectivity for M.2 and PCI Express, but it has dual PCI Express Gen 5 slots, which is a bit more rare on motherboards. You actually don't generally find dual Gen 5 slots. That gives you, again, the flexibility of being able to have like high-speed storage or specialized accelerators or adapters that would benefit from that. It also has mini SAS, right? And some people are very much familiar with M.2 kind of being the focus for connectivity, but I'm actually a really big fan of SimSAS because you can adapt it to U.2. Take for instance one of my primary builds, I'm not actually really a big fan of M.2 in general. It's a really cool specification. It can offer a huge degree of performance, but it was originally designed for laptops. It's quite a bit more thermally constrained and density constrained than U.2 or U.3, which was designed specifically for kind of desktop-based configurations, whether you're talking about desktop systems or servers or workstations. And because of that, you've been able to have generally nowhere near the thermal consideration issues and much higher densities. Take, for instance, in one system, you could have a 30 terabyte U.2, U.3 base SSD. Well, that's just not physically possible with M.2 because it's too small. And you also have power and thermal constraints that you would have to kind of deal with. Even right now with the latest generation PCI Express Gen 5 drives, thermals are definitely a huge factor of being able to maintain performance over time for those type of drives, because you're dealing with, wattage that can easily be over 10 watts, right? So that starts to give you quite a bit of heat within a very small area that you have to dissipate. And that's why boards, have these things like M.2 heatsinks. So actually, it seems subtle, but it's pretty cool that, again, you don't have to use all these extra PCI lanes just to be able to get a large degree of storage. You could just buy like a 12 terabyte or 16 terabyte or 20 terabyte U.2 or U.3 drive, and you'd be good to go. So, but that's not the board I want to talk about. The board I want to talk about is going to be a little bit of an update here. So let me go all the way down here, and it's going to be for actually a cool micro ATX version of it. And this is going to be the board that will be coming up. So let me go ahead and show you guys. This is going to be the Pro WS W680M-ACE SE. So this is essentially just going to be a micro ATX variant. So for somebody that's maybe going to be looking to be able to build a more compact, workstation system that gives you a robust level of kind of support for technologies like, one, you're going to get dual Ethernet on this. So you're going to have dual 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. You will still have that mini SAS connection. So again, you could support something like a 12, 16, 20, 30 terabyte U.2, U.3 based drive, right? You still have traditional SATA, you still have traditional M.2. It can support 12th or 13th gen series CPUs. You have also ECC memory support, which is officially supported on this motherboard. So if you require kind of mission critical stability and reliability, especially for professionals, which are going to be running maybe extended renders, or they're going to have a high degree of uptime. So that means the system's always active and it generally is not rebooting, right? It could be running, hours, or days on end, where most general users, probably sometime within 24 to 40 hours, you probably shut down or you reboot your system. Some people use sleep or hibernation, it kind of varies, but generally these systems see a lot more consistent uptime, and they also critically have their system being loaded for a sustained long period of time. Another really cool element of this board will be that it does feature out-of-band management. So that means that you can actually remotely monitor the system to be able to get information like temperature. You could actually remotely update the firmware. You have a lot of robust features, and that's supported within what we call our ASUS Control Center Express technology, and that's of no additional cost to you on the motherboard. And that actually happens fully on a hardware-based level with a dedicated BCM that's on the board. It's pretty cool. This model actually also will feature even the support for Thunderbolt. So if you wanted to be able to have Thunderbolt connectivity, you could add in our Thunderbolt add-in card and you would be good to go. So overall, this will be a cool addition to those that are going to be looking, like I said, more for a actual workstation, hence why this is a WS centered board, right? Great foundation to be able to have a stable and reliable and pretty cool board when it comes to users that need robust storage flexibility, that networking connectivity, and a stable, reliable platform to build on. So that is going to be coming out later on. I don't have a specific release date for you. It should be released before the end of Q3. We'll definitely, of course, have more information here on the PCDIY community and, of course, on the weekly stream when we actually do get ready to release it, right? Let me go ahead and see if we have any quick questions that came up right here. Where are the links listed here on YouTube? If you look in the description, links, I usually try to include links to the group, and then any kind of other pertinent links should be included in the description. If you guys are also checking out us on Facebook, you should also see corresponding links there as well. If not, if you're part of our ASUS PC DIY group, which you can actually go ahead and just search for online, you'll find that we have a featured post that has all those corresponding links. Hey Connor, happy to join you here, man. Happy to have you join us here. So thanks so much, man. Very, very cool. Michael notes so when is the next Maximus coming with U.2? I can't talk about any next generation motherboards, but if you really did want to take advantage of U.2, what I did from one of my systems takes, for instance, my system, which was a Z690, one of my primary daily drivers, and then I switched over to Z790. Of course, those boards don't have U.2, but I favor U.2. So you can actually buy just a PCIe card adapter. And so it's a small adapter that just slots into a PCI Express slot, and then you can take the U.2 and it just slots into the adapter, and then just bam, you just plug it in. So very, very simple. Like U.2, there's no cables. You literally just plug it into a slot and you're good to go. It does mean you have to use a slot, but you can get an all black card so it looks really sleek and really clean. I don't mind it. And for me, again, I favor having essentially that performance and that density available to me as to having to have one like M.2 drives. You have to consider thermal pads. Like I said, you're going to be more constrained in terms of capacity, right? And if you want to go to higher densities, you're going to have to start to stack multiple drives, right? So if like you want to go like, oh, I want 8 terabytes, there's starting to be now, of course, single 8 terabyte based drives, but you even have more choice within U.2 or U.3, and you can go to much higher densities. And again, you just have more flexibility, in my perspective, right, when it comes to that, right? Janny gives some feedback. He goes, the SlimSlash cable looks so slick and slim. It's great to see. Yeah, it's just a nice level of flexibility and functionality. Scott David is asking actually about the UEFI BIOS. There's actually no voiding warranty. We actually already talked about this previously. It's been covered extensively in our UEFI update in the PCDIY community, and we actually have a formal update on our ASUS website. You can contact the service and support team. We've never actually voided the warranty, and we're the only manufacturer as of right now to clearly communicate that even if you engage or enable DOCP or XMP on an Intel or an AMD motherboard, it does not void your warranty. That's actually listed publicly on our service and support website. You can check that information information by going to our service and support site. No other manufacturers actually made that statement and claim. And for our entire range of AM5 motherboards, we've unilaterally already released UEFI updates that are in alignment with AMD's essentially max SoC voltage. So AMD issued essentially max SoC voltage guidance, which affects essentially the memory voltage that you would have when you're running kind of overclocked memory configurations, being 1.3. So if you're going to run Expo memory, which is overclocking, generally the SoC voltage does need to be increased to stabilize that. There is a little bit of factors to consider that with the reduced max SoC voltage, some memory kits may be affected relative to stability, but we're continuing to work with AMD and memory partners to try to maximize memory tuning. And there's some really exciting updates that we're seeing. I've already seen internally on our team. We've been able to see some new milestones on AMD's platform side to really break through even faster and faster memory speeds. But to your point, you don't have to worry. It's actually since the end of April, every single AM5 motherboard that we have in our lineup has had the max SoC voltage UEFI BIOS available. So yeah, you can download it, update your motherboard, and you do want to update or uprun it if you're running essentially any AM5 base series CPUs and plan to run overclocked memory. If you don't run overclocked memory and you run just pure stock memory, so an example is like right here, this memory right here, this is from Crucial. This is actually a pretty special kit of memory. This kit is sorry, let me go ahead and remove this. This kit is their Pro Series, and it's pretty interesting because most memory, and I did a demo on this, so you can go back and check out some of the prior streams. Most memory, when you install it, will run at actually below the JEDEC port table for AMD. So AMD's port table for memory, if you kind of don't understand what I'm talking about here, some of the people in the chat are going to be like, this topic again is being brought up, but you know, some people they're not aware of it, so I'm just going to go ahead and touch on this a little bit right here. But if we bring this up, give me 1 second here. Let me go ahead and separate this out. Okay. Take for instance here, you go to 7700X. If we go to example right here, here's the port table. So that's the officially validated memory speed that's supported by the memory controller. You'll see 5200 is the max. People talk a lot about 6000. That's not an official memory spec. It's just a supported memory divider because it's an overclocked DRAM divider. All our motherboards support it. So yes, you can overclock your memory, but we're talking about just official validation, and why I'm trying to explain to you a factor of how your SoC voltage is in relation to this. When you run stock memory, the SoC voltage doesn't have to be modified 100% at all. That actually allows you to have the lowest temperatures and the lowest power consumption, and it actually can even sometimes benefit you in terms of having a little bit improved boosting behavior. This Crucial memory is pretty interesting because it's one of the few kits on the market that actually will automatically post default at the 5200 max table. Most 6000 kits actually will be below that. They will post at 4800, and you have to manually go in and enable an XO profile, which will also automatically increase your SoC voltage because you're attempting to stabilize the overclocked frequency. So either which way, to your point, doesn't matter. You're running stock, you're running overclocked, download the new UEFI. You can use Expo, you can use XMP through our DOCP feature, whatever you want. All of them work, and neither one of them will void your warranty. So if you have any other questions, feel free to go ahead and either check out our group, because I've got a lot of posts, a lot of information already on that topic, or you can reach out to our service and support team. Okay. All right. Let me go ahead and see any other quick questions that might have came up right there. And Scott David, hopefully that answered your question. Just the boards needs, I'm not sure what you mean. And 3D Canesi by DDR4. DDR4 right now is great. It works on all Z690, Z790 based motherboards are DDR4, as well as also for AM4 based platforms. So there's no issues in that. You always have to remember though that some users assume that there's an issue with, like, let's say like a board or like the UEFI, but a lot of times it can be through their misconfiguration of memory. So take for instance, you get users that commonly will buy like 2 duplicated kits of memory and try to run some type of profile, and then they'll fault the BIOS and they say it's the BIOS's fault. But you have to account for, one, the profiles you're attempting to run were never designed to be run with a 4-DIMM kit. If you actually wanted to run 4 DIMMs, you would buy a 4-DIMM kit. Now, in some situations, can you make that kit configuration work? Yes, it's possible, but you've reduced the likelihood because the subtimings, the corresponding voltage, and even things like the SoC voltage and other parameters, they were all defined initially for that 2-DIMM configuration, not take, for instance, like a 4-DIMM configuration. And then again, if we go back to our port table, you can't actually ever assume that overclocking is guaranteed, because you have factors like what this even inherently shows you at stock. You can actually see right here, and this actually exists for DDR4. It's not new just for DDR5. DDR4 works exactly the same way. When you increase rank and density, you affect scaling. So if you go with more dense configurations or higher rank configurations of memory, your scaling goes down. You keep your rank lower and your density lower, and your scaling goes up. So what does that mean? Very easily, if you have like 16 gigabyte memory, it overclocks higher. If you have 32 gigabyte memory, it overclocks higher. You go to 64 gigabyte memory, it overclocks lower. Why? Because it's a dual rank memory. You go to 4 DIMMs, generally the overclocking is lower as well, because it's also going to a more complex load on the IMC. There are other factors too, like DRAM topology between like daisy chain and T topology, and one topology favoring 4 DIMM configurations versus another topology favoring 2 DIMMs. Right now, pretty much all boards right now favor daisy chain, because 2 DIMMs, especially under the DDR5 era, make a lot more sense, because 2 DIMMs can give you the density that the vast majority of users, and especially gamers, need. Gamers do not need 64 gigs. They don't need 48 gigs. They don't need 96 gigs. They don't need 128 gigs. You really are talking about trying to get the most performance out of a density configuration. So that's usually going to be 16, 24, 32 gigabytes, right, which are going to be kind of in that sweet spot of giving you the highest frequencies and good density, right, especially under gaming or general desktop use. All right, just go ahead and see any updates on new Open. I don't know what new updates you would be referring to. We've already gone ahead and already issued for the vast majority of M5 boards. They've already actually had, most of the boards have already seen updates within just the last month update alone. But as I already noted, there's always kind of, especially for these platforms, you're going to continue to see more updates, but they're already mature at this point, especially after I think the updates that came out in April that contained the newer GISA, which was in alignment with AMD. And that's a very solid release. I'd probably say the next milestone release, again, it's not really going to be critical for the vast majority of users unless they're probably looking to run ultra high frequency memory kit configurations. So they're really focusing on overclocking DRAM memory, and I would probably start to expect those UEFI releases probably later on in this quarter, right? Okay. I'm not sure what you... This is actually not correct. So wish the X670 Pro creator had more support for overclocking RAM like XMP. So I'm not sure if you actually understand the way that XMP works. One, XMP is not an AMD spec for memory. DOCP is something ASUS invented, right? We actually created the algorithmic table to map XMP profiles. So in that respect, actually, you have a huge amount of support for it because we implemented support for XMP overclocking functionality on all AMD motherboards by inventing that DOCP function. Because prior to that, you would have had to manually take a XMP kit and manually put in the frequency, the timings, and the voltage, right? But the DOCP function allows you to take any existing XMP kit and put that on an AMD motherboard. That doesn't change, though, the fact that the kit that you're attempting to run, though, was designed and validated for an Intel platform and an Intel memory controller. Why is that important? Well, if you go take a DDR4 4133 or 4200 or 51000 DDR4 kit and try to run an AM4, it's not going to run because the memory controller performance of AM4 is not going to be as high or as performant as it was on DDR4 for those Intel platforms, right? So you have to account for that. There's overclocking mechanisms and aspects that you have to account for that influence that. But from the simplicity perspective, if you're targeting something like DDR4 3600 C16 or C14, that's generally going to run without any issue. So it's not hard. It's just as simple as just going in and enabling that function. So it's important to understand there is no XMP that exists on AMD AM4 platforms. It's always going to be DOCP reading the XMP information. And part of that was because unlike AM5, which has Expo profiles, which were designed by AMD for memory partners to work specifically on AMD platforms, that didn't exist for AM4. AM4, all the memory kits that people were attempting to run were Intel validated memory. Now, some manufacturers went through extra effort to create modules that they specifically did validate during design and development for AM platforms. So that's where, like, G-Skill, take for instance, had their G-Skill memory, and they had specifically like a Neo line, and the Neo line specifically although it had an XMP profile, they did further elements of validation that were specific to the AMD platform, right? So hopefully that clarifies your question there. Scott, actually, no. Again, that's actually incorrect. Even by the end of April, we had already had a non-beta release. The beta came out after the fact, which actually included a new AGISA, and it contained a warning message, which we've actually had historically for a wide number of years, and that caused some confusion. A few days after that, we removed that warning message. And again, to the point though, is that it's irrelevant at this point because we've already confirmed for users directly through our service and support team and through a public notice that any users, regardless, are going to be covered. If you want to run the boards and you want to engage Expo or you don't want to engage Expo, doesn't matter. And we now have formal releases of all those corresponding UEFIs, so there shouldn't be a concern whether you wouldn't want to go back and run like an old beta for some reason. So the point being is if you have an AM5 board right now, you can download a formal release, which means it's fully supported and validated, which is the difference between like a beta and a non-beta release. And you can do that with confidence. And if you have any, like I said, other questions, you can feel free to reach out to our service and support team, and they're more than happy to be able to give you any insight that you need to have relative to the process or any other questions that you might have. Okay. Right, let me go ahead and see. Hey, David, happy to have you here. All right, so let's go ahead and I think what we talked about now, that kind of little bit preview board. Okay, let's go ahead and just quickly touch on some of these new products that we have going on. So let me go ahead and bring this up here. Got a little bit detracted there with some of those questions, but that's quite all right. So this is quickly the recap of the new items that we have coming out, right, that we're releasing in terms of channel availability. So like I talked about, 2 new monitors. We've got a new high refresh rate 1080p monitor and then a new high refresh rate 1440p. Both of these you can see are going to be definitely on the entry side in terms of the price band, so not expensive. They're not our flagship based or enthusiast based specifications, but I think hit nice just sweet spots of giving you just solid options if you're not looking for something super expensive and you're looking to be able to upgrade. On the GPU side, the 4060, I think for the vast majority of users, the 8GB model is what actually makes sense from a price to performance ratio, and actually in the vast majority of games, 8GB is way more than enough. As you start to get into 16 gigs, you really have to actually be in conditionally specific scenarios that I think would be beneficial to you, but we do essentially have that available to you if you want, or you might be maybe working in a professional workflow application where you might want to use something like the ProArt card that can maybe leverage that additional VRAM. So we have essentially a dual model. We'll have a TUF gaming model. Excuse me, not a TUF gaming model, but a ProArt model. So that's actually a little bit of misnomer. That's the ProArt. So dual, ProArt, and then ROG STRIX. So the dual will be 500, the ProArt will be 530, and then the ROG STRIX will be 570. In terms of actually the overall experience, all of them are fundamentally going to be cool, quiet, and fast. So you don't have to worry about that one model is not going to be effective or stable or reliable. They're all produced using our ASUS Auto Extreme production process, right? So that's an advanced process that we use to be able to actually build the PCB, place all the components on there, and actually do the validation. Really, what you start to get as you move up is going to be more in that you're going to even get cooler temperatures, quieter operation, and higher clock speeds. There can also be aspects such as the the default power limit, and the TGP for the card will be modified. So where that comes into play is, take for instance, like on the ROG STRIX card, it will have a default higher TGP and a higher maximum power limit. That's beneficial to overclockers or people that want to be able to gain more performance. What does that actually translate to? It depends, but on average that could be 5 to 8%, right, in terms of a bump in terms of FPS performance, right? Plus there's going to be other elements, like you get things like more RGB lighting, even more premium design aesthetics. You'll have, of course, things like the fan connect headers, other elements that you're going to see in terms of improvements on. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here just to quickly recap just the lineup as it is right now, so that for those of you who are not aware what our graphics card lineup looks like right now. Now the ROG Matrix has not been released yet, but that kind of reasserts itself as our premium highest end, so our most exclusive highest end base graphics card. And it's important to understand that there's a differentiation between ROG and ROG Strix, right? Traditionally though, ROG Strix is usually our kind of flagship, our highest end series. But if we account for the Matrix, technically it would be the ROG, which is a Matrix, and then ROG Strix. Then we have our TUF Gaming series. We have the Noctua, which for the 40 series right now, it only exists. We have the 4080 and we have the 4070. So there's 2 models now for the Noctua. TUF Gaming, We then now have recently introduced the ProArt series, which you'll see is that's a new series that we have. ProArt, you can get it in the 4080, 4070 Ti, and then you can also get it in now in the 4060 Ti 16 gig, right? So 3 different GPUs for the ProArt. The big benefit probably most in the ProArt is going to come through on the 4080 and the 4070 Ti, because traditionally you're going to see graphics cards that are a bit larger, especially for the 4080, where the big benefit of the ProArt is that it's going to be very compact, 2.5 slot, and dimensionally it works really well even when you're starting to go with micro ATX or mini ITX based systems. Plus, it was also optimally designed for a 2-card slot configuration. While there's no active GPUs that are actively leveraging like NVLink or SLI, under a GPU compute workflow, so if you're using the card for GPU acceleration in professional applications, you can actually benefit from having multiple GPUs. So we specifically designed the ProArt series to complement workflows where you might actually have 2 users running 2 4080s. Right? And you need to actually have the correct slot spacing, because normally with any other 4080, take for instance like here, the Noctua, that's 4.3 slots. There's no way that you're fitting 2 of those on a motherboard. You're only going to fit 1. Okay. We then have our dual series, which was revamped and redesigned for the 40 series. So we have the dual series in cards like the 4060, the 4060 Ti, the 4070. That is available for the dual series, and that comes in white and it comes in black, so you can get it in 2 colors. So even though I'm showing you the white, you can get it in white and black. KO series, we have not refreshed in 40 series, but it is a model and series that we still do have available within 30 series. It's generally in that mid-range series, so cards like the 3060, take for instance, you would see models like the KO. Phoenix as well, we haven't refreshed for the 40 series, but right now we still do have Phoenix models for like the 3050 and for like the 3060 series. And keep in mind that these is applicable for AMD, although AMD doesn't necessarily see every single series represented here, right? So like there's no Noctua AMD models, right? But TUF Gaming, for instance, you can get a 7900 XT or a 7900 XTX in the same way that you could get like a 4070 Ti or a 4080, right? If that makes sense. So depending on the series and the model, you have different ones. And then the last one is one that probably not too many people are familiar with, but we still do offer them, is our SL series. SL series are pretty rare because you have to have a graphics card where the GPU is essentially cool enough to be able to be done entirely passively. SL means silent, so it is a full passive heatsink. So we have a couple of different, actually a few, so I think there's 3 different silent models. These are all compact, thin cards. They're directly powered just by PCI Express. You can have ones that have like 4 HDMI ports on there. That can be nice if you're just looking for a kind of a simple low power option there to be able to give you just more display output, or maybe upgrade from like more basic graphics. That's where the SL series. So that's our entire graphics card lineup. Okay. Although I don't have LC series in there. LC series is still kind of part of the Strix series. It just happens to be our liquid cool based models. Okay. So in terms of an update that we have right here, which is going to be for the graphics card side, we've got the TUF Gaming GeForce RTX 4090 OG. This one is going to be the non-overclocked model. So we already released the overclocked model. For those of you not aware, we essentially do have generally 2 different models that we release to the market. We have an OC model, and then we have a standard model. Both can be overclocked. The difference is that the overclocked model comes factory overclocked. So that means that we will program it with a higher clock speed, and it's validated in the production facility to be able to operate at that higher frequency. Again, as overclocking can't be guaranteed. Now, does that mean that you can't take the standard model and overclock it to the OC settings? No, it's possible, but again, it's not guaranteed. And depending on the level of the overclock, you can generally see a larger and larger delta between success or not success. So Dave, for instance, you probably have a pretty reasonable success of taking a standard model to a standard OC level. But when you talk about maybe the clock speed differential between something like an entry dual card to like the ROG Strix card, like on the 4060, you'll actually start to see more of a depreciation, because we actually have to do more work at validating that GPU that can hit that clock frequency on that higher end side. That's going to definitely be the case. Take, for instance, like the ROG Matrix. The ROG Matrix 4090 will have a very, very premium bin skew as far as the GPU, because it's going for an ultra high frequency, right? It's the fastest out-of-box clock of all 4090s on the market. So the percentage of actually GPUs that can reliably ensure that frequency is going to be small So that is kind of a little bit of a differential if you're kind of wondering between the OC and the non-OC. The big benefit here is this is actually using a similar design shroud that we had in the 30 series, but it's been applied to the 40 series. It's a more compact based design. So instead of something like 3.6 slot, you have a 3.2 slot base card. And so it allows just for more flexibility of fitting in a wider range of chassis. Still very good thermal performance. So you can still feel comfortable and confident that you're going to get a cool, quiet, and fast graphics card. So just because it's not as big as the 4090 version, right, the original 4090 version, so let's say not the original but the first to launch versus this being called the OG original 4090, right, you're still going to get a very cool and quiet based graphics card. So again, we will offer the OC version and the non-OC version. And like I said, the big benefit here fundamentally is going to be that it is going to be a 3.2 slot versus the larger configuration on the 4090. If you have this room and space though, because effectively they are the same price, I would go with the first edition 4090 just because that's even going to give you even better thermal performance. And anybody's wondering, some people incorrectly think that we just kind of repurpose, we take the same cooler from the old gen and we put it on there. It doesn't work that way. The PCB and the topology and the layout's actually entirely different. So we have to redesign the heatsink assembly to be specific to this GPU layout. So it is essentially not just taking the same GPU and just putting it on there, excuse me, the same heatsink and putting it on the GPU. We actually do have to redesign it. All right, let me see if we got any quick questions right there. PGPCs, will the water blocks that fit on the regular 4090 fit on the OG model? As JC is noting, and as I just explained, no, right? Because since the PCB and the actual topology and the layout is different, they are 100% not interoperable, right? This has specifically been designed for people that need essentially that flexibility of that, hey, my chassis, my configuration, I really want to go with a 4090 and it just won't fit. It's kind of somewhat similar to think about it from the perspective of what we did with the ProArt, right? Where there was people that was like, I really want a 4080, but I can't fit a 4080 in my chassis. So we made the ProArt 4080, which is a 2.5 slot 4080, allowing people to essentially now have access to that classic graphics card. This is the same design intent. This is not to serve the broadness of the market because really, even though a lot of people commented and media commented that saying like the cards are really big, there's actually a very large number of chassis, even down to $100, from not only from ASUS, but from, Fractal, from Cooler Master, from Fantex, from Lianli, that all can readily accommodate, our TUF 4090 and our ROG STRIX 4090. So it's not as if you're ultra limited, but I think where it becomes a bit more challenging is maybe if you have chassis from, 3-4 years ago, or maybe you have a more kind of OEM type chassis, you're maybe trying to upgrade the graphics card, more scenarios. So here we're just trying to give more flexibility, more choice, so that if you run into an issue resident to size, you've got another GPU that you can consider as part of that. Okay. Omer? Is it Omer or Omar? I'm not sure, but he ordered a TUF Gaming Z790 Plus Wi-Fi D4 for the 13700K. What do you think? I think that's a fantastic board. It's one of my favorite boards in our lineup. It's got a good number of I/O, nice M.2 expansion. It's very performant. 100% has no problems running a 13900K. About the only thing I wish that it had, right, and it's one of the values of going to the ROG Strix model, is you don't have ASUS AIOC. But if you're just interested in having a turnkey experience, just running it in there, essentially running at stock, of course you could still manually overclock it if you wanted to. It's going to get the job done. Great board. I love the design aesthetic on it. For me, when we launched the DDR4 version, we did it because DDR4 pricing was definitely much cheaper than DDR5, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Now at this point, the price difference between a 32 gigabyte kit of DDR4 and DDR5 kind of in the general market, it's actually only about $25. So for me, I think that the DDR5 version makes actually more sense, just because you even get better multi-threaded performance, right, for general application use, and you have the pathway to even higher density and higher performance over time with higher frequency memory, especially with 13 Gen series CPUs, because 13 Gen series CPUs, the vast majority of them can easily run memory speeds of over 6800, 7000 MT memory, especially when you're only talking 2 DIMMs. But it's a fantastic board. Really solid foundation, man. Thanks for being TUF Gaming. I think you've got a solid board for your build there. Let me see. Hey Jesse, I'm not sure what you mean by like reigns. ASUS has had kind of a long-term history as always being an overclocking leader, right? You know, so if we definitely talk about kind of from the motherboard perspective, we've unquestionably been the leader for, you know, probably more than 15 years, right? If you talk about world record performance. And already I think what we've shown with the Matrix right now, where we've already set, you know, the first frequency to be able to achieve 4 gigahertz, we're already showing you that we can easily handle kind of building designs that allow for the highest level of performance in the extreme segmentation. But it's important to understand there's a fundamental difference between extreme overclocking and general purpose overclocking. I think when you talk about our performance, we've already been superior to competitors even like EVGA when they did offer graphics card solutions. When you would talk out-of-box performance, right? 100% you could take our ROG STRIX cards and put them against an EVGA solution, and we were generally offering cooler, quieter, and faster performance. So I think we were offering already an outstanding enthusiast class product. Now, when you talk about customized extreme OC scenarios, that wasn't necessarily a focus for us, you know, over the last few years when it came to graphics card solutions, because that's a very niche audience, right? It's a very specific audience that literally wants to strip the entire graphics card apart, put a, you know, block on it, right, a pot, and then, you know, use liquid helium, use liquid nitrogen, dry ice, a cascade, whatever it might be, to cool the graphics card, and pretty much not game on it. You're only going to benchmark. You're not gaming, you're benchmarking, right? And those are two fundamentally different approaches. And I think our goal was to try to offer products that were performant, aesthetically minded, and really purpose built for gamers first, right, than necessarily trying to design for a niche. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have interest there, because of course we do that on the motherboard side, where we've got products like, let's say, the Apex or the Gene boards, which are really designed for kind of those extreme enthusiast community, even the extreme models where we kind of try to ride the balance of both, a bit for kind of the extreme overclocking community, but also for advanced PC DIY enthusiasts. Especially as of right now, I think we're going to continue to take feedback from the community on what they would like to see feature and function wise, but that's always a challenge, because the more that you put on any product, that can also increase the cost. And while there's definitely some people that don't have a problem paying more as they get more, I think as you add cost to anything, that can also always add a lot to the conversation in terms of how people interpret the kind of the resident value. And when you start to get into more niches, that also causes more challenges in terms of how people interpret value, right? You know, the more niche something is, actually, in some ways, you actually lower the value, because to the broader set of users, they go, that's not important to me, because the normal user won't use that. Like 7 out of 10 builders won't use that specific function or feature, so therefore the value to them is nil. Whereas maybe for that 1 or 2 or 3 users, they go and they see that feature and they go, oh, that's absolutely amazing, and of course it has value. And that's always a tricky balancing act to figure out, you know, how you try to add in those elements to be able to speak to different users in the market, especially within one product, right? So that is going to be the TUF Gaming 4090. So that, again, to just recap right here in terms of the pricing for those GPUs, you can see right there the TUF Gaming 4090, right, $1699, and again, we already have the overclocked version, and that is available right now. And then the dual models and the TUF ProArt and the ROG Strix, I'm not going to recap those, but again, just to recap, these essentially are the same as the 4060 8GB models, which of course, it's about approximately like almost like about $100 less if you want to drop down in terms of the price band, right? The dual $499 for the 16GB. Now keep in mind, these are all OC. All of our 16GB are only OC models. We don't have standard models. So they're all going to be at having a little bit of higher clock speed. While on the standard 4060 Ti 8GB, we do have standard and we have overclocked models. So we actually have both, okay? So there's a little bit of difference there. So $499, $529, and $569. Again, this is an error right here where this is for the ProArt, not the TUF Gaming. So there's no TUF Gaming 16GB base model. Okay. All right, guys, we're going to get ready to talk about the monitors here, but let me see questions right here. H2O goes, release date, probably time frame. Anytime we kind of talk about anything from a channel release cycle, there's always a little bit of variation. So we can't give you the exact time frame because timeline in terms of the actual e-tailers and logistics, right, can vary, right? So, you know, a Newegg to Amazon to our ASUS store to Micro Center, they all have their own logistic pipelines. So generally what we try to communicate is about a 10 to 30 day cycle. So that means somewhere within that time frame, within that cycle, right, you're going to see the product start to show up in terms of channel inventory. Historically, some of the quickest essentially turnaround in terms of listing the product will be our ASUS store and probably Newegg. as far as kind of the quickness to kind of see a product listing. Micro Center also works pretty quickly with us. They're brick and mortar. They generally don't sell as much online, but they're pretty quick also. But you will see, of course, the listings over time across the entirety of our channel partners. So whether that's going to be Newegg Online, that's going to be Amazon Online, Adorama, B&H, and other partners and whatnot. Go ahead and see. Any difference in the power connector? No difference in the power connector. They're both still utilizing the 12 volt high power connector, and that actually does bring a point right there that I guess in case anybody's looking at any kind of the newer higher end cards, I would recommend do consider checking out our TUF Gaming Gold series of power supplies that are already available. But these are all 12 volt high power native based power supplies. They feature really nice high quality, what we call our fully etched modular cables, which I think are the best cables in their class compared to any other PSU manufacturer for the cable quality included inside the box. The PCB actually has a nano coating to protect from things like dust, debris, and dander. And I think wattage wise, very reasonable, 750, 850, and 1000 watt. Really solid price points, great 10-year warranty, right? Cool, quiet, and efficient. And I think the other thing that you also want to kind of keep in mind here is that when you talk about kind of the overall transients in terms of the power demand for the 40 series, it's significantly lower than actually the 30 series. So you don't have to necessarily be crazy and be like, I'm going to get a 4090, so I have to get like a 1200 watt. It's actually, it's not even anywhere near that close. The actual peak transients in terms of the maximum kind of spike power draw that the graphics card is going to have is actually much lower than, let's say, the 3090. So in that respect, actually, if you had a power supply to career on 3090, it's going to have no problem running actually a 4090. It actually went down overall. It's actually one of the really cool things that's impressive about the new architecture is the actual improvements in the efficiency. All right, go ahead and see right there is Scott's noting, is ASUS working on an AIO to lower the temps on new AM5 CPUs? Would love to see the temps comes out. So we've actually talked about this in our launch live stream. There's no reason for the temps to come down. For one, the CPUs are designed to run at 95 degrees. Now, if you don't want to see them run at 95 degrees, you're effectively going to be lowering performance, right? Because the thing you want to keep in mind is as you put a better cooler, if you took a tower heatsink, and then you took a 240 millimeter IO, and then you took a custom water-cooled system with a 360 millimeter radiator, they could actually all get to 95C, but the difference is actually that the sustained clock speeds that you're going to see is going to be higher the better the cooling performance is, because the way that the actual CPU has been designed is essentially to work at that maximum temperature, but maximize its boosting behavior. Now, ASUS to allow for users that for whatever reason have a discomfort of seeing temperatures in that regard, which to be frank, there's no reason that you should even be concerned with that because it's not an issue, right? There's no reason for you to be concerned with those temperatures because the CPU is designed at that. We did already implement a feature that we called PBO enhancement. This is actually offered on all of our AM5 motherboards. So you can actually go into the UEFI and you can select an option that allows you to define a specific thermal limit. The 90C mode is quite impressive because it already will be lower than the maximum default temperature for the AM5 CPU. But it actually will even give you better performance. And we actually do some kind of optimization balancing in terms of the PBO parameters. You don't have to know anything about that. You just pick that temperature target. If you really wanted to see lower temperatures, then you could pick 80C or you could put 70C. So it will actually readjust this all in the firmware level. There's no software configuration. There's nothing you need to do. Just reselect this option and that's it. You're good to go. But it's very important to keep in mind, I stress this, that a lot of times there's maybe been an over communication on media's part, sometimes within reviews, to say that the temperatures are of a concern, but you have to count that there's a big difference in terms of how you represent the temperatures. So you as a user have to go, when you're looking at a review, is the reviewer or the kind of the temperature breakdown being shown as kind of like an extreme multi-threaded scenario? So am I showing you like an hour Cinebench stress test? But the reality is that if you're probably running your system, you're probably not running a multi-threaded workload for 1 hour. The vast majority of users or gamers, for sure, gamers, you're not going to ever see those temperatures. If you check the game load temperature or general desktop temperature, it's going to probably be 30 to 40 degrees lower. It wouldn't be unreasonable to actually see that your probably CPU's running somewhere between like the 50s to like mid 60s in terms of your temperature. So the temperatures already actually very, very, very low. It's not an issue. It's only when you're looking to heavily load up the CPU. So it very much depends. To that point, though, we are the only manufacturer right now with multiple 8th gen Asetek-based pump solutions, AIOs, which they feature a larger pump, a more performant pump and a larger cold block. So we talked about this with our Ryu Gen 3, right? Where with the Ryu Gen 3, you have that bigger pump block. Let me see if I have the images right here for it. If I don't have them right here, then it's not that big of an issue. But do I have it here? I don't know if I have it here. Let me double check. But those have kind of been designed specifically for the new generation of both Intel and AMD platforms, which you see that, of course, that the power draw and the heat that they have to deal with is going to be essentially more demanding. So that larger pump block covers essentially more of that surface area to be able to give you better cooling performance. So to your point, your question is, do we have them? Yeah, we already released them. The Ryu 3 and specifically the Ryu Gen 3 are both utilizing that essentially higher performing radiator. They have higher performing fans. They have a larger block and you're good to go. But you don't need to go all the way up to that cooler unless you really, really just absolutely want, those lower temperatures and you want some of the other really cool aesthetic benefits of that. You could easily run those on a high performance tower heatsink. You get like a deep cool or a Noctua or a thermal right cooler, for $40 or $50, and you'd be entirely fine. The last point that I'll bring, I guess, into this conversation, David, here for you to kind of be mindful of is also keep in mind that different CPUs have different kind of power envelopes, right? So if we take a look here at, let me go ahead and bring this up here. The power envelopes that you have will kind of vary from one CPU to another, right? So an example is like, you can take a look right here, and this isn't fully translate, right? Of course, max scenario, you can actually go over these, but you can see right here, like the 7700X, 7700X is going to be right here, like 105, and then you can have another CPU could be like 120, right? So different CPUs will have different kind of power scenarios you have to work around, right? But take a look at that kind of PBO enhancement feature, and then just like I said, account for your temperatures in kind of a more realistic scenario. Are you gaming? Are you using a multi-threaded application? What are you doing, right? So hopefully that'll help you in terms of reaching the right decision for what works best for you. Ambi Van Dux, I'm not sure what you're referring to in terms of laptops. We only talk about component products. We don't talk about laptops here, but for laptops, the actual warranty for any laptop is going to be a minimum of a 1-year warranty. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean. If you have a confusion on the warranty, you can actually just go to the Surface Support site. There's actually a serial number lookup function. You can take your serial number and you can put it in there, and it allows you to check your actual warranty information. But the warranty, it can kind of work one of two ways. Either it goes off the data production based on the serial number, or it actually is reflected based on your data purchase. So if you always have your receipt, that is essentially from the data purchase to whenever that ends relative to the product you have, because different products have different warranty levels, right? So it could be a 1-year warranty, or take, for instance, like on a power supply, it's 10 years. On another product, it might be 3 years, right? But you can check that corresponding information. If you're wondering about it, just reach out to our service and support team, and they can assist you at helping you understand what makes sense. All right. Let me go ahead and just see. Hey, Carol. Fantastic. Thanks so much. Yeah, the ROG Ally, we don't really talk about the ROG Ally here because this focuses actually on DIY components, so systems that are designed systems that you put together yourself. The Ally is almost kind of like a laptop, but in a very small, compact, handheld fashion, right? But it's pretty cool because it works as a, remote gaming console, but at the same time, you can actually use it like a general laptop because you can dock it and you can use a keyboard and mouse. You can connect it to a bigger monitor. It's got a lot of really cool functionality, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, JC makes a point here. It's more important to look at power draw and not just temps. Yeah, and they kind of go together, right? Because the more power that you use in something, the increase that you're going to have in temperatures, right? And also, you do want to account for that in temperatures, they spike, right? So the way that actually a lot of CPUs are designed, and actually this monitoring circuits that are built into them, depending on where they're positioned and the density that you have, you actually now have very, very quick spikes in terms of actually temperature. So you can go from one temp point to another temp point, and it's really, really fast. In the past, you could actually seen it go a little bit more slowly where it was kind of like this, but now it kind of will shoot up very quickly, but it will begin to normalize pretty consistently. So again, you really have to kind of measure multiple aspects. You have to talk about your workload, you have to talk about your power, you have to talk about, you know, the cooling solution, right? All of those things kind of play a part. But the reality is a lot of the times I think people over stress about temperatures because the workload is really what matters most, right? The workload and the duration of that, right? So again, if you're running, you know, as somebody that may be doing like 3D modeling, maybe you're going to be running rendering for, you know, multiple hours on end, right? That's a very different workload because you're going to have all your cores heavily utilized. So you're going to have a very different power draw and very different temperature outcome than as if you're gaming. And even if you were gaming for 3, 4, 5 hours, the temperature, the power draw is going to be entirely different. They're literally not even going to be remotely similar. It's literally like one's going to be like right here and the other one would be like right here, right? So they're quite different. Okay. All right, so overall, that takes care of that, guys. So let's go ahead and get to the new monitors that we've got within the lineup right here. So we're going to go ahead and touch on those. So sorry about that, guys. I think we might have had a quick dropout right there. I'm going to go ahead and take a moment right here and just confirm if everybody can let me know if there was a quick dropout. I went ahead and just relogged back in, and I just want to confirm everybody is actually getting everything on the stream correctly, and we'll kind of keep moving that forward. So give me 1 second right here, and I will go ahead and bring this up. So on the monitor side, we're going to get ready to touch on the 2 new monitors. And I will bring these up right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and wait. Okay, great. So somebody's already confirmed for me that it's now okay. Yeah, there was just, seems like it was a dropout in terms of the window. I might have accidentally clicked on that. Yeah. All right. So no worries in that regard. So as now we're going to go ahead and take a look at those 2 new monitors. We got the TUF Gaming VG279Q3A, and then we have the VG27AQ3A. So very similar. You kind of want to maybe think about them as the Q3A monitors. One is going to be 1080p 180 hertz, and the other one is going to be 1440p 180 hertz. Okay, so both essentially 180 hertz. It's just 1440p or 1080p. Pick the one that makes the most sense for you. Okay. So let me go ahead and bring these guys up right here. Give me 1 second. All right, and we'll go with the 1080p first. I think the 1080p. We'll go with that one. Are these monitors available in India? I can't actually confirm for you that they're going to be available in India. You know, every region has its own what's called product matrix, so they carry their own assortment of products. So this can vary. So if you're in Australia, in India, Japan, Germany, France, you always have to check with ASUS in your region to find out if these monitors will be available. So everything that I'm talking to is applicable here to ASUS North America. Okay. All right, so first up right here, so we have the VG279Q3A. So that's going to be a 27-inch 1080p based monitor, 180 hertz in terms of the refresh rate, fast IPS. So that's a new panel, new technology. So that means you get a lower overall pixel response time, quite dynamic, 1 millisecond gray to gray. It's important to keep in mind that that's your peak response. That's not representative of the response time across the entirety of the panel, but overall that's going to be a good representation to let you know that you have good pixel response. Okay. You get FreeSync premium support. ELMB Sync is going to be our backlight strobing technology. The sync part means that we can do the backlight strobing at the same time with adaptive sync. So that's actually pretty rare. Most monitors usually, if they allow for backlight strobing, can't do it with adaptive sync at the same time. This monitor has a lower brightness than some of our higher end monitors that have ELMB Sync. So I would say that it becomes a little bit less beneficial. So it is something to keep mind of, that you may not find value of it, but it's just this nice feature that if you want to try out to see if you can improve motion clarity, you can try out ELMB Sync. That's the main thing, is with that backlight strobing, it is quite impressive. When it works really well for you, you can actually find that the improvement in the motion clarity perception can sometimes be that of a significantly higher refresh rate monitor. So you going to like a 240 hertz, it could actually seem clearer than a 240 hertz monitor utilizing the backlight strobing feature. You do also have G-Sync compatibility. Variable overdrive is actually also pretty rare for a monitor at this price point. That essentially just means that we are handling the way that the overdrive is working across the refresh rate cycle. That's important to help to give you good motion clarity, whether the monitor's at, 90 hertz, 120 hertz, 144 hertz, or 180 hertz. So it provides just a more consistent experience. The 99% sRGB is nice because it means you pretty much have a full 100% almost coverage of the sRGB color space. So you get a nice color accurate monitor. Although keep in mind that ideally you would still want to calibrate this monitor. It's not like our ROG Strix monitors, which all come factory calibrated. Okay. One other point that I'll make on this monitor, which is pretty cool, again, at it being a pretty low price point, is that it does come with our display widget center. This is a really cool piece of software because instead of you having to physically touch any buttons on the monitor, you can just install the software and you can control the user interface for the monitor inside of Windows. So if you want to make it brighter, if you want to adjust the contrast, if you want to have, different settings you want to switch to, so you want to switch to like sRGB mode, to like racing mode, to FPS mode, you can make all those adjustments and never have to physically touch a button. You just use the software inside Windows. So I'm a really big fan of display widget. Okay, you have two HDMI ports, DisplayPort, and a 3.5mm jack on this model. And then ergonomic adjustment is basic. It's just tilt adjustment that is available to you. Last but not least, I will note that an important part, like all of our LCD monitors, this does feature a 3-year warranty. Compared to many other companies at this price band, they may be offering you only a 1-year warranty for their monitor versus a 3-year warranty. So again, here you get a really overall solid foundation. So that's going to be for the TUF Gaming VG279 Q3A. Okay. All right, next up, let's go ahead and take a look here at the 1440p monitor. So this monitor is pretty much going to be the same. Literally almost all the specs are identical, except that it's a 2560. So I'm not going to recap everything else because everything else is the same. It's a 180 hertz fast IPS eLNB sync, FreeSync Premium G-Sync variable overdrive. The one big benefit is right here is that it's 130% sRGB. So it's actually a little bit more punchy, a little bit more dynamic in terms of the color palette. Some people like that. Ideally, I would still recommend using the sRGB mode, and you still may want to manually calibrate it for the best color accuracy, but this definitely means that you can cover the color gamut without any issues. So that's very, very nice to see. So the main benefit here is going to be going over to that 2560 by 1440 resolution, which I'm a huge fan of. It gives you just a lot more space to work with on your desktop, 130% sRGB, and very reasonable in terms of the price point, which is not $199, it's $249. So just $50 more for essentially that big increase in terms of the resolution. Beyond that, there is a little bit of tweak in terms of the kind of the ID design on this model. They both have slim bezels. They both still have the display widget. The connectivity is the same, dual HDMI display port and 3.5, but when we go to the ergonomic adjustment, you're going to have tilt, you're going to have swivel on this. So you have both, so tilt and swivel. And also the base design is a little bit different. So if we go ahead and take a look at this image, you'll see that the base design on this monitor actually does have like a little bit of an integrated like cable pass-through option, where the standard, well, not the standard, but the 1080p model doesn't have that cable routing pass-through point. Okay. There's also one other thing, if I remember on this one. Let me go ahead and check to this image. If I remember correctly. Oh no, does it have this? I don't know if let me double check here on this tech specs. We go down over here. Okay, yeah, no, it does not have that. The other item that I just wanted to go ahead and double check on though is going to be, some people ask, like, do they have speakers? Both of these do have speakers on them. They're not, super dynamic speakers, but if you just want to have them basic for maybe watching like a stream, like listen to a podcast, or for basic audio, they can be kind of convenient from that perspective. So you do have basic speakers that are on both these models. So the 1080p and the 1440p model. Okay. Let me quickly see if we had any questions that came up right there. Somebody's asking, can we attach the mouse to the monitor for better hardware latency? You generally wouldn't want to add something to something else to get better latency. Generally, the direct connection to the motherboard is always going to be the preferred option. That being noted, we do have monitors that support advanced features like NVIDIA Reflex, which allow you to actually measure specifically your total system latency and mouse latency. But those are going to be significantly more expensive monitors. We're literally talking about, 3 times the cost to get into monitors. Although the 1080p NVIDIA Reflex monitors that we have actually are probably about double the cost. So they're not that much more expensive. And we've had them sometimes at promo. I think maybe the cheapest that we've had, the 1080p ROG Swift monitor, maybe has been like around $350, so maybe about $100 more, so that's not too bad. But you would have to look for one of our monitors that has NVIDIA Reflex if you want to connect the mouse to the monitor to be able to monitor total system latency. Otherwise, we do have monitors that have USB hubs built into them, so if you want to take your mouse, right, and attach it to the monitor, whether you're wired or wireless, that is possible, but it's not going to improve your latency performance, okay? Joey goes, are they both IPS? Yes, they're actually not just IPS, because we have many monitors, especially in the more entry side, where they're just basic IPS. Generally, more basic IPS are going to be older IPS-based panels, which actually have also higher, higher refresh rate times. These are both fast IPS-based panels, so that means that the actual pixel response time is lower than just a standard IPS. So they are both fast IPS-based panels. Any plans for a TUF 2K model with 240 hertz refresh rate? Yeah, so right now, possibly. I mean, we've already kind of expanded the TUF lineup pretty wide, right? So I think probably you're asking about, so here, let me go ahead and go. So where is it right here? We've already kind of increased TUF Gaming to offer quite a number of options, but yeah, we may offer one that would be specifically like, let's say like this one. So if we talk about the ROG Swift, probably 1440p, 240 hertz, still one of my favorite monitors that we have within our lineup, which is going to be this monitor, right? And we still do offer this monitor. We have this one, and of course we also have the 360 hertz, but I think you're probably referring to something like this, right? So 1440p alongside having like a 240 hertz refresh rate. I think the balancing act though is also, it's not just about having like the refresh rate, right? Ideally, the big value that you get here is also even the NVIDIA G-Sync processor does have advanced benefits for really outstanding variable overdrive performance. You also have actually higher brightness performance right here. There's a very high color gamut. So there's a lot of factors that go into that when you get to a certain panel, right? What is the expectation of performance you're looking across for the entirety of the experience, right? I think definitely on the TUF Gaming line, we're trying to hit that balance of offering you kind of very competitive pricing, but still very good spec. But it is something we're evaluating as far as trying to bring down, I think, the option, right? I think 240 though is still a pretty aggressive target in terms of refresh rate and FPS, right? Because you need a pretty high performing GPU to be able to do 1440p at 240 hertz, right? You're literally talking about like 4070 Ti, 4080, 4090 class graphics, right? Unless you're talking about a very moderately driven game engine. So in that respect, still that kind of aligns well with being kind of on the higher end monitor side of the spectrum. And probably maybe another year and a half or 2 years, you'll start to be a little bit more realistic to where that target will be more in line for kind of more the mid-range 1440p experience. So I still think in that space, 1440p at like that 165 to like 180 probably makes a lot more sense for the vast majority of users, right? Yes, Jason, we already have announced the 49-inch, so you can actually go back and check out our prior streams of the PCDIY group for the announcement on our 49-inch ultra-wide monitor, right? H2O is asking, can you VESA mount them? Yep, all the monitors can be all VESA mounted. That's pretty much like always a guarantee, right? And like, and Michael notes here, he makes a point, yes, you always have to get all your VESA external items separately, right? So you have to account for that. All right, so that takes care of pretty much our, both our new monitors as well as our, new graphics cards. So the TUF Gaming OG 4090 and then the dual and ProArt and the ROG STRIX 4060 Ti's, right? So the last thing I want to just touch on right here is going to be a little bit just kind of a recommendation. We've got a couple of promotions going on for a couple of boards that I just want to quickly touch on. So for those of you that might be actually maybe looking to build a system, we do have some current promotions on AM5 and then I think on Z690 or Z790. So, and AM4. So one of them is going to be right here is going to be the TUF Gaming B650 Plus. So this is normally $230. It's a nice, $20 savings down to $210, but it's probably one of the overall best kind of value boards that you can, again, run any AM5 CPU that you want in here. So you could do a 7600, 7700, 7700X, 7800X 3D. It doesn't matter. Any one of them from the entry to the highest end, they will all work with stable and stability and reliability. You've got Wi-Fi, 2.5 gigabit LAN, isolated audio. You've got a wide range of actually M.2 expansion, with all of them having, of course, their M.2 heatsinks on there. Very solid board. It's a great, I think, option for those that don't want to go super expensive, but want to have a stable and reliable platform with good features, good connectivity, and a really nice, clean ID design. So, nice little promo discount for those that are be considering that. I would probably pair this, in my opinion, probably I think something like a 7600 or 7700 are probably my go-to recommendation. If you want to stretch it and you've got a little bit of budget, sure, you could consider an X3D series CPU, but you're going to be spending even a little bit more. So again, depends on your price point, but I think any one of those three CPUs I would probably go with. And again, I wouldn't go with a AIO cooler unless you absolutely want the aesthetic. I'd probably go with something like a Thermalright, cooler. One of their models, maybe something like a Peerless Assassin, or maybe something like a Deepcool A520 or something like that. That's more than enough to keep it cool and quiet and be able to give you a great experience. And again, you'll keep the price point of the overall build a little bit lower. Another one that we've got on promo right here for AM4, even though AM4 is older, of course, we have that brand new, of course, X3D series CPU that I think a lot of people have been interested in. That's really an impressive platform when you talk about the performance. Both the new Ryzen 5 X3D, as well as, of course, with the higher end 5800 X3D, both of those are still great options for the AM5 platform. DDR4 is still a bit cheaper, right? So if you still want just a very solid and stable, still good feature set platform, this is a very solid board. That you have available to you. So we've got the ROG STRIX B550S Gaming Wi-Fi 2. So this one is updated because it's the Wi-Fi 2. It's got some nice updates, like you get the Wi-Fi 6E, you get the 2.5 gigabit LAN. It's got, integrated I/O already on there. Nice upgraded Supreme Effects audio design. It still has dual M.2 heatsinks on this model. So still a very solid option in terms of giving you a well-rounded board with good feature set, modern I/O specifications, and again, you can support any one of the Ryzen series CPUs. But realistically, again, for gaming, I don't think you would want to go and buy something like a 5900X or 5950X, anything like that. I think it really comes down that you should be targeting probably either the new X3D or maybe that 5800 X3D. Those are those two CPUs that I would probably be taking a look at to place on a board like this if you're building a new system and you don't want to jump into that higher price band that you have for AM5. Of course, AM5 is going to give you even better performance and a longer CPU life cycle, but if you're looking for kind of that minimum cost, but still very, very high end and competitive performance, then this could be a great option for you. On the Intel side right here, we've got the TUF Gaming Z790 Plus Wi-Fi. We already had somebody in the group talk to us about this model, but they bought the DDR4 version. This is the same exact one. It's just the DDR5 version, right? So again, great choice. You've got tons of actually M.2 expansion on here, big heat sinks, one heatsink here, another heatsink here, another heatsink here. Then you still have another, so you actually can have up to 4 M.2 based SSDs. It has the nice Q release ejection mechanism right there, so that you can actually easily eject your graphics card. Got the integrated I/O shield. You got the Wi-Fi 6 with Bluetooth, the 2.5 gigabit LAN on there. Nice big robust VRM heatsink. Very, very good board. Very reasonable for the price point, $270, and you're good to go. And again, it will run any one of the CPUs, no issues. And you can also overclock on this. I've also run over DDR 7000 on this, so it can still even support some nice high spec memory if you wanted to kind of go crazy and really push up the level. About the main differential is going to be, I think, a couple of things. One, you don't have native PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 SSD support. So the maximum, even though you get tons of M.2s, is going to be that it's PCI Gen 4. You're not going to have the ASUS AIOC technology feature on there. I think those are going to be the two main things that I go, like, maybe that's where I would want to maybe jump up to like an ROG Strix board if I was interested in that. But you would have to jump up all the way to something like the Dash E to get PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 based SSD built onto the motherboard. All right. So there's a couple recommendations on that side. All right, guys. David James says, my son just bought this board. He loves it. Oh man, fantastic. Thanks for being TUF Gaming, man. If he hasn't, have him please share his build and his board in the ASUS PCDIY group. I'd love to go ahead and see that. That'd be pretty cool. Another user right here goes, is recently bought the Ryujin 3 and I love it. It's so good at keeping my temps low compared to my previous AO. Man, fantastic. Yeah, the Ryujin 3 is an absolutely beastly cooler. Which one did you get? Did you get the Noctua version or did you get the one with the daisy chain magnetic fans? The daisy chain magnetic fans is pretty sweet. It's really, really cool in terms of the overall design, right? It makes the build experience just that much nicer, right? All right, let me just go ahead and see if there's anything else there. I think that covers that. All right, guys, so let's get ready. I think we're going to go ahead and jump into the PCDIY Builder Spotlight. So let me go ahead and bring up our submission form. So give me 1 second right here for the PCDIY. Oh, actually, no, I forgot one item, didn't I there? So this one, I am just going to go ahead and quickly touch on. I know for some of us, you might be surprised. It's not really a PCDIY component, but it is part of our actually ASUS component business line. So I do just want to quickly touch on this right here. So give me 1 second. If you guys are not aware, ASUS does actually carry an entire line of wearables. We've actually had wearables for really actually over a decade. We've been making them for a long time. And we are getting ready to release our new update. So right now we actually have 3 Vivowatches. We have the Vivowatch 5 SP, and then we have the Vivowatch 5, and now we have our Vivowatch 5 Aero. So this one, actually, the really cool thing is it's the world's first essentially thin profile, right? Like, so single thin profile design where you actually have PPT built into it, you have ECG built into it. There's a lot of robust functionality that's built into it. Also, quite a bit better battery life than, let's say, like a traditional kind of smartwatch, where most of the time you're talking about maybe a day, maybe a day and a half battery life. So on the Vivowatch series, they're quite impressive. They can actually go to, you know, over a week in terms of battery life. This model is 4 days because it's quite thin, but that's still 4 days. Again, if you're just maybe looking for something very lightweight, right, in terms of, you know, giving you that flexibility to have essentially a little bit more dynamic information about, you know, what you're doing from movement to activity to kind of sedentary aspects. You want kind of maybe basic notifications, you want reminders for supplementation, or you want reminders for pills. You want to be able to have something that to take with you when you're going out for maybe basic workouts like running, biking, hikes, walking, stuff like that. This does integrate GPS, so you don't actually have to have, you know, your phone with you. I know for me sometimes, like if you just have like some shorts on and things like that, it can be a little bit kind of maybe inconvenient to always kind of carry your phone, which especially if you got a bigger phone, it can be larger. So this is kind of pretty cool in terms that it's just small, compact, really clean to integrate, gives you all that information, and the price point I think is very reasonable when you take a look at that. And again, I think compared to kind of a lot of the commoditized smartwatches on it, again, you're kind of buying from a company that has a long track record at, you know, doing high quality designs with good quality feature set and functionality. And we have a very robust app ecosystem. So we've been developing our ASUS app for the Vivowatches for years, and we consistently update it to be able to offer new functions, new features, so that you can go ahead and integrate that information in there. It is available for both iOS and Android, so you do have information that is supported on both of those in terms of the application ecosystem. The strap there is a silicone-based strap, so again, that's very nice in terms of being an inert item, so you don't have to kind of worry about it kind of kind of irritating your skin or anything along those lines. And again, you've got a huge amount of data profiling that you have available to you there, so you can go ahead and monitor that information as well as share it with, you know, friends or family if you have that. The 7-day battery life, like I said, that's going to be in the extreme power savings mode. For kind of the more general use, I'd say like I was talking about, you're probably going to be looking at about that 3 to 4 day usage. And again, if you're probably looking for something that is a bit on the higher end side, you even want a little bit more advanced functionality, or maybe you want more battery life, then we do have the Vivowatch that will be the Vivowatch 5 or the Vivowatch SP, which also have a little bit more of a circular face, which I'm a fan of. So let me go ahead and just bring up just some little close-up images right here so you can kind of just see them a little bit more closely. So give me 1 second. All right. So here you can see just a nice close-up of it. I think it's got a really nice clean design, right? And again, very easy to be able to go ahead and put your finger right there for, of course, your vital measurements, but you also do have passive measurements that are occurring also consistently in terms of the unit right here. And so again, you got transit time, blood ox, ECG, right? There's your ECG and PPG, right? And so that's for periodic consistent monitoring, as opposed to if you want to do direct on the fly, and all that information available to you. And the 26 grams is very nice and very lightweight. So if you're also somebody, again, that doesn't want a huge amount of weight on your hand, some people are a little bit more sensitive. I'm a much bigger guy, 6'2", right? You know, over 200 pounds. That's going to be not a big issue for me. I sometimes even want to have a little bit more weight depending on it. But again, it gives you a little bit of preference. So entirely your choice. Let me go ahead and just see any quick questions there. Give me 1 second. JJ, seems like a nice watch, but seems a little expensive. Actually, I think if you compare it, if you actually look at some of the other watches from, you know, Fitbit and from some of the other manufacturers, as opposed to, let's say, like a quote unquote no-name manufacturer, the actual pricing is quite competitive. And if you actually talk about the feature set, so the total feature set that you have actually available, it's actually very competitive for the resident price, right? You want to keep in mind that not every single unit is going to offer you that same level of functionality, right? In terms of giving you all of the different actually monitoring. So let's take a look at a couple of things. So this is actually a good example, because sometimes you can find that if you're just trying to quote unquote get a basic step counter, sure, you could get something that's like probably like $40, but one, that's just a basic G sensor, right? But you might not then have GPS, right? So again, if you're maybe somebody that's you know, biking, walking, hiking, you might not want to carry a phone. You might actually want route tracking independently, so that actually adds on additional costs. Then you account for not only having that PPG sensor, but the ECG sensor, right? Both of those built in actually gives you some additional flexibility in terms of the number of data points that you can collect when it comes to kind of wellness, right? So I think you kind of all add that in all together, and then you talk about the ID design, the profile, the resolution, also the display. Some of those more basic units might have very basic displays. They're probably not going to be an OLED display, probably an LCD display. So the battery life will probably be worse too. Probably only going to be like a day or something like that, day and a half. Here, you're actually going to have, like I said, up to 7 days with that kind of low power consumption mode, versus like the traditional be probably being 3 to 4 days, right? So hopefully that gives you a little bit more kind of context. JJ, is the TUF AIO LC240 a good cooler? Yeah, that's actually a very solid cooler. I've used that one in a couple of different builds. I like it because it's actually got a really clean and simple pump, minimal cables and lightings, and you're good to go. No issues. The only thing you might want to keep in mind is that I think we released that before 13th gen. So you may want to actually reach out to our services support team to get actually the new upgraded bracket. That just helps to optimize the Z height to give you a little bit more kind of optimal kind of a contact between the IHS and to the cold plate. But that's about the only thing. But you can definitely cool a 13700K with that cooler, especially if your focus is gaming. You're going to see good reliability, good stability, good temperatures under load. You don't have to kind of worry about it. David goes, never seen this one. You haven't seen this one because we're literally just launching it. So right now, initial availability will be on the ASUS store. I think we have it right now. Let me go ahead and check right here. I'll go ahead and link it in terms of the ASUS website, but it'll be available on our ASUS store. Yeah, so right here, you can see you can go notified me. Our other models, of course, have already been out since about last year. I think I showed the Vivowatch, the 5 off, but yeah, we'll have them a little also there. Justin goes, I'm also pumped for the Zenfone 10. Oh, yeah, it's a pretty sweet phone. We don't talk about our systems related product on here, but Zenfone 10, Zenfone 9, they've been doing an amazing job. You know, if you really kind of want that nice balance of wanting something that's compact, premium quality, really performant, right, and a really nice balance, it's really hard to beat, you know, especially like I said, at having something that it's not super large and it's much easier. I'm a little bit maybe out of that category, being a bigger guy with big hands. It's a little bit easier for me to use something like even an ROG phone, which is a really big phone with a big surface face, right? But for a lot of people, I think it is much more challenging when you generally want to use your phone. They end up kind of doing the dual hand kind of scenario, right? And it's actually quite a bit more convenient to have something that's quite a bit more pocketable and friendly for your hand, not have to kind of stretch out, and it's more comfortable to kind of put in. So thanks for being Team Zenfone. Pretty cool. All right, guys. So let me go ahead and kick off here the PCDIY Builder Spotlight, guys. As always, if you guys are interested in submitting your build for the PCDIY Builder Spotlight, all you need to do is go ahead and be part of our PCDIY group. You can go ahead and submit your builds so they can be featured here on the stream. So let me go ahead and bring up our first one right here. This is going to be from Mark Van Acosta, right? Declassified Systems, one of my favorite builders. He does a huge amount of builds. He's always doing stuff for, of course, his clients. So a lot of the builds you see aren't necessarily personal projects, right? He's doing them for client builds, but he does some awesome stuff, even when it's just kind of quick and off the cuff. Very, very well executed. But of course, when you have somebody that's been doing that many builds, they bring their experience and their expertise to the table. So we've got a cool build to check out here. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at it. So again, Mark Van Acosta, Declassified Systems. Let's see what we got right here. I'm going to go ahead and open up a form here. I don't think I have a full submission form, but I have the specs here for this guy. So, all right. So let's see. Oh, first photo. First photo is going to be just the GPU, but already this is pretty nice, pretty clean in terms of the overall image. So we can see we've got an ROG STRIX based graphics card in there. Really nice and clean job. I'm actually a really big fan right here. He actually used hook and loop fasteners. He didn't use zip ties. I'm not a fan of zip ties. Zip ties can tend to actually cause too much compression. You can crimp and you can damage cables. And there's actually even international standards, if you're not aware of this, in terms of production, that if you actually use tables, they can actually break those international standards because they're not designed for those specific purposes. So hook and loop fasteners I find are quite a bit more friendly, and they're also easier to adjust. This is really clean, and I don't know that I've seen a build recently that's used them like this, but really, really nicely done. Hey, he does use, of course, some zip ties down here, but really, really nicely done in terms of that. Very, very clean. We've got a Hyper M.2 card installed down there, which is pretty slick, so be able to supplement some additional PCIe expansion for storage. As we pull back right here, we can see that this is going to be a serious build. We've got everything from, of course, our flagship chassis, so the GR701, so the Hyperion. We've got a Maximus Z790 Hero. We've got the Ryujin 3, so the Ryujin 3, that's our latest flagship AIO. We've got the ROG Thor, Platinum P2 series power supply, our flagship ROG Strix Gaming 4090. You've got a Core i9, I'm assuming that's probably 13900K, 13900KS. You got the classic Lanley Unifans, which so many people love. Got G-Skill memory, and then three, that's right, three 990 Pros. So some very fast PCIe NVMe M.2 storage. So continuing our look here, I like that only went with 2 DIMMs. So that means we're helped to maximize the DRAM scaling in there. So that's going to be great for performance, right, at ensuring the kind of the best frequency scaling as opposed to just putting 4 DIMMs in there, even though you could for sometimes the purpose of aesthetics. Really nice clean clouding, really clean and consistent right here in terms of the cabling. Some people wonder, hey, why is there that extra cable there? The extra cable is for the actual supplemental power, because on the Maximus boards you get that 60-watt power for the USB-C. So if you want a quick charge via the front USB port, that is going to be a benefit. So he did connect that power, so that's a nice little thing to see right there. Now as we pull back and we take a look at the system, that is nicely done. Really cool. I really love the actual vibe right here as far as the color scheme, where we've got actually the kind of the silver, the black, and the white kind of all playing along there. So I really like that color scheme where it didn't just go all red. Actually, I really like the vibe of having a little bit of the white and also having the red in there. I think it looks pretty cool in terms of having that gradient. I love how the Thor always looks there in terms of just having that little just kind of additional pop that you get at the bottom of the build, but super clean. Really nicely laid out. You get the full ARGB light panel that's in there, which is pretty cool. If you guys didn't know, you can take that panel out and actually run it externally. It's kind of cool. I love the Polymo display there on the Hero. This build probably even looks even way better in the dark. And it's pretty interesting. He went with actually a vertical orientation for the Ryujin cooler. So he didn't actually go with the standard orientation. He actually rotated it. That's one of the cool things about the Ryujin, is that you can actually tweak it. You can go vertical or you can go horizontal. So it depends on whichever one you want. So pretty cool, but really, really nice just layout. I mean, all the cable management is on point. Just a nice, clean, well executed build. There's nothing to negate on there, right? And you got that really cool vibe that, of course, the Hyperion has. This image actually does a pretty good job that some people don't realize that the Hyperion is actually a high airflow chassis. These are huge slats that it has in there to allow for all that intake airflow. So even though you got those 2 big tempered side glass panels on there, they don't actually fully seat in a way that kind of blocks everything out. And then you got those slats in there. You got no problems with airflow in this chassis. And you got tons of room you can go, of course, custom water cooled. And Mark, and he's already done builds where he's actually done full custom water cooled loops in the Hyperion. So you can equally go, air cooled, water cooled in the Hyperion, because you've got tons and tons of room, right? Very, very easy. That's a really cool shot. I really dig that shot with the classic kind of red and black kind of vibes right there. Again, here it's cool because he changed the orientation. He went with the vertical orientation. That's nice. It gives it a different vibe, different look, and it has kind of a symmetrical vertical kind of path to the polymo display, which is on the board, which I really like. I really like that look and vibe, right? There you got a little bit more of kind of that classic kind of rainbow color scheme on there. And then with no ARGB lighting on, I really like that vibe too, right? It's like almost like the dark mode vibe, right? Where it's just like still really clean, really nice. What do you guys think? Do you vibe with kind of the RGB lighting off? It's still really nice, and I really like just having that little bit of color pop there with the red cables. That's just a nice touch. I'm a big fan of that. So overall, I mean, clean, well executed, nothing you can niggle on here. I mean, of course, he's a fantastic builder, super experienced. So I would expect nothing more, nothing less from him, than a clean and well executed and laid out chassis. And this is definitely the case. So a really nice build and a great way to be able to show that. So we got some feedback right here. It goes, team no RGB. I get it. Hey, it's not everybody's vibe. David goes, I'm summoned. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for the stream, man. Fantastic, man. Thanks for joining us, man. Have a good Friday night. Stay safe, healthy. Enjoy your weekend, man. And hopefully get some gaming in, man. Take care. All right, so very cool build from Mark Van Acosta, Declassified Systems. Let's go ahead and quickly take a look here actually at the core specs, although I think I highlighted pretty much most of them right there. So give me 1 second right here. All right, so what do we have? So this is going to be 1300K, yep, Maximus Z790 Hero, 4090 ROG Strix, the Hyperion. 1200 watt was for the Thor P2 Platinum, the Ryujin 3. 32 gigabytes. He used a DDR 6000 MT. You could have probably gone a bit more, of course, with the Z790 board and the 13900K. You could really be looking at like 66, 68, 7000. But definitely nothing wrong. 6000 is already still overclocked, right? And if you were going with maybe a little bit more of a tight timing kit, then you can still have some really impressive performance. Three 990 Pros in terms of the PCIe NVMe M.2 storage. He did add some additional Thermaltake Lumi plus RGB LED strips. He's got the Lanley Unifans in there, and overall really nice. So great job. I'm going to go ahead and link, if you guys are not following Mark online, I'm going to go ahead and drop his Facebook in there, and you guys can also check out his YouTube channel. Let me link the YouTube channel for Declassified Systems there. Michael goes, ARGB for sure, and lots of fans, right? To each his own, right? That's the beauty about PC DIY, right? There's no right or wrong answer, right? Everybody can have their build the way that they like it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our next build here. All right. Give me 1 second here. All right, so next up, let's go with small form factor. This is going to be from Black's Tech, I believe. This is from Black's Tech, and this is Kiarel as. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. All right, let's go ahead and see what we got going on here. And this is actually going to be a small form factor build. Oh, all right. So interesting stuff. Of course, FLT 120. Of course, that's a very useful type of water cooling solution to utilize, of course, in a small form factor build or a medium form factor build where you have a little bit more. I can tell you right here, just by seeing these little slats, that I know which motherboard this is utilizing, which makes me very excited because it's one of my favorite motherboards that we've produced in the last few years. So as we pull back right there, that's right. That's on a Maximus Gene board. I absolutely love that board. It's no longer available. It was a limited production run for the AM5 platform, but it was also a 2DIMM enabled motherboard, so an absolute beast. I can tell you already, we have done over 8,000 MT with AM5 CPUs on this motherboard with the upcoming Agisa and new UEFI BIOS, so really, really impressive. So this chassis is quite similar to actually our AP201 in terms of being a compact micro ATX chassis, but that gives you a huge amount of room for water cooling or for air cooling configurations and supporting even larger graphics cards. So you can see right here, this thing has been really packed to the gills in terms of actually components, but really, really nicely laid out. A lot of utilization of space, you know, really kind of where you've used about every inch in here as much as possible. So you can see you've got the Gene board in there, you've got your 2 DIMMs, really cool layout right here with, of course, the CPU, and then you're moving out here to the FLT, and then you've also got there. So that's a pretty interesting design. I don't know if I've seen one ever kind of implemented that way where you literally have two and you've got one to the left and one to the right. You've got the integrated flow meter, which visually, I think it's cool and it's nice to know that. I know some people like to have them here. I almost feel like I would rather take it out from the loop. That's just my personal preference because I love already the lines you did here. And this is actually a pretty slick run and bend right here. This bend that goes up and over and pass through. It seems simple, but that's quite impressive and it's tight. This also is a bit of a challenge. They always seem silly, but literally within this tight of a space to create almost those parallel lines and have them feel very consistent and symmetrical, it's actually a bit of a challenge because it's pretty easy for your eye to actually go, I can see something a bit off, and it's quite nicely done. Again, this tight bend right here is also really nicely done. Some nice work that's been done on this build overall in terms of just attention to detail and over layout. I really dig the color scheme here. The white really complements not only the black with the base contrast, but then also that green going into the blue is a really nice transition color scheme, which just gives it some cool vibes. So I'm definitely feeling it. Then you got our ROG Strix graphics card in there. You got, of course, tons of Lian Li Uni fans in there, and overall, I think it's a very cool vibe, really cool setup. Yeah, Miguel notes Declassified Systems is the guy from the Philippines. He does crazy builds. Yeah, he's an amazing builder. So oops, my bad. He notes for this build, yeah, super clean. This is really clean. Actually, both of the builds. So the one from Mark from Declassified Systems and this one from Blackstex also is very, very clean. Really, really nice builds. You can see that nice attention to detail even with the right angle adapter that actually pulls down the cable. Really cleanly to leave the top area for the backplate nicely exposed, so you just have that nice clean backplate that's visible, giving you that bold and bright kind of visible on there. Love just the subtle then RGB lighting that we have there. You do lose a little bit of that, of course, nice quad LED lighting that we have on the graphics card, but part of the value of the white on the ROG Strix card is that beautiful, nice white shroud and that white backplate. So it's still definitely has value in terms of you went with the white graphics card. It really complements the look and feel here. And you could have definitely gone with a block on this, but part of the value of going with the ROG Strix card is the actual thermal solution. So it's a very high performance thermal solution, and I think it works within the color scheme. But let me know, what would you guys think? Would you rather have gone with put a block on it, or would you have kept it like this? I love the simplicity and just ease and the look that you have here with keeping just the CPU and then going with the GPU in this route, right? Plus, it would have even added more complexity, and it even makes it more of a pain if you want to maybe access things on the motherboard, because if you have it wired in here, this is already all locked in, so it's already a lot of consideration if you want to make any changes. Having the card that can be easily removable is actually, I think, a value point as well, and I like the design aesthetic. If you were going to block it, it probably would have made more sense to go with the TUF card, because then you don't have to worry about losing the shroud and not getting the color value that you're paying for if you get the white Strix card, right? Because definitely if you go white, you really want to keep the white. If you're going to put a block on it, the TUF Gaming makes the most sense because it's lower in cost, still a great PCB, very performant, and we also offer the same water blocks across partners for both the ROG Strix and for the TUF Gaming models, for this generation at least. In prior generations, that wasn't always the case, right? Yeah, just really, really nice work there. Here you can see those nice bends, clean, well done, well executed. Again, this bend right here, maybe really the most impressive for me, just a really subtle one, very, very nice. I mean, of course, you can do these with bend kits, right, you know, to be able to assist this, but still some very nice, clean runs. I like even that choice right there to go with just a little bit of the soft lighting in there. I think that works well. It just gives you a little bit of kind of illumination in there. It's a great looking build. Clean, well executed, nice routing options, a little bit distinct, and that color scheme's on point. I mean, what is not to like, guys, right? So let's see. Feedback right here is Michael notes, it's a beautiful build. H2O Computers goes, a sweet build. Loving it so far, man. Thanks for the shout out. Oh, yeah, for sure. I would have only blocked a TUF GPU, not the Strix. 100% agree, right? So, oops, my bad notes is I would have preferred a block on it, making it an all-one system, just personal preference. I can understand that, but again, for me personally, I prefer this more. And again, the thermal performance already on the card is going to be really good, so you're not really getting a big temperature benefit, and then you're going to add more complexity, and you could even add damage. The reality is that while you can generally not have an issue, there are people that literally damage their cards just by putting a block on it, right? And there can even be more that goes wrong. You then even have more maintenance. And then, like I said, 100%, it becomes a much more challenge to be able to access the board and the whole system, because then you tie in that loop, right? And you're probably not going to be doing anything like quick disconnects, right? Because this is all hard tubing. So yeah, there's definitely some balancing acts to keep in mind, right? Facebook user goes, show off the card for sure. Miguel knows, no block. The build is great from the tubing runs, bends, and fittings, right? He goes, H2O Computers is I probably will never only water block a CPU personally. But then I go, you're H2O Computers, right, Mike? You know, so it's in your name, right? So I think, you know, that makes sense, right? So overall, though, a fantastic build from them. I think that they did a great job. I mean, just again, fit, finish, and polish and overall execution is really nicely done. It's a great showcase. And I'm sure, again, if they wanted to integrate that in there, it would still give you, of course, some nice space, some visual separation in there. But I think overall, it turned out fantastic. A really nice build, and they get a serious thumbs up from me. Really nicely executed, right? So Black's Text, man, great job. Great build. All right, so next up, let me go ahead and actually, I think I need to re-download a submission form because I missed out on it. So I've got to actually download quickly William Moore's, who's our featured build, actually in our thumbnail. So give me 1 second to go ahead and bring his down here quickly. You got to go ahead and head it over here. So 1 second, I'm going to go ahead and get this one. All right, so let's see here. Let me find it. So give me 1 second. Oh, actually more than 1 second. Apologies. This will just take me like a minute or so, minute or 2 minutes or so to re-bring it back up and make sure that I've got the file on hand here. Want to make sure to get all his corresponding images. Okay, here we go. Yep, William, got it. All right, so let's go ahead and bring these up. And this is a pretty cool build. It's got definitely a different vibe and a different look to it compared to, I think, a lot of water-cooled builds. I think actually a lot of the, almost probably, well, no, the first one wasn't a water-cooled build, but definitely that's one of the really cool things that's interesting, I think, about water cooling, right? There's so many different kind of approaches to how people kind of go about it, whether you go with kind of integrated kind of look with, you know, a lot of like heavy use on terms of distros, which we see now, where we didn't see so much distro utilization in the past, right? To where we also have now external options, right? And then we even can go to all types of kind of permutations and configurations, right? And this one is a great example, again, of how there's just so many which ways to approach these type of builds. So let's go ahead and get all the images here. All right, so this is going to be from William Moore, and what is the name for this system right here? Give me 1 second. So Aero Cube. All right, Aero Cube by William Moore. All right, so this is going to be Aero Cube, William Moore. All right, guys. Well, let's see what we got right here. All right. So right off the bat, we can definitely see we got something pretty interesting. It's definitely not a traditional, of course, chassis, of course, layout and configuration that we would expect, right? It definitely has elements of a Q, but it's also got elements kind of like a V, almost evocative of almost kind of like an engine block in some ways, which is pretty cool. Definitely also kind of evokes, I think, something that's very performant, right? When you're literally just seeing that many fans on there, right? So you've got a massive, of course, array radiator right there where you've got all those fans in there, but that gives it that heavy symmetry in there with all those fans. The cool thing, of course, with such a high performance radiator configuration like that is that you should probably be able to run just like a fixed fan RPM profile. So probably something conservative, you know, maybe something between like 400 to like maybe 1400 RPM, something in that range. So it's effectively, it should be near silent, you know, or you could even keep a fixed RPM at something just like 1200 and it's just going to be very lightly audible but supremely cool. That's really one of the cool things about an ultra large dense radiator with so much fans. It's not actually loud, you just can keep it consistently at a low actually RPM and still have great thermal performance. I actually really dig the fact here, I don't think that these are actually hard lines. I do think this is I think this is soft tubing, which if it is, I'm always a big fan of soft tubing. It's easier to go ahead and implement, right? It's more flexible, easier to maintain, lower cost, and the same performance as a hard line, right? So for me, the vast majority of my water-cooled builds, I always focus on doing soft tubing. That's my preferred option. I also actually like a little bit more of the fluid lines that you get as opposed to like so many kind of like hard perpendicular kind of lines that you tend to see within hardline builds, because so many of them are using you know, specific bends and then specific alignment with things like distros, so you generally don't get a lot of curvature to them, right? Although there definitely have been builders that have started to kind of see a departure in that respect, right? So when we get the top look perspective, it starts to even get a little bit more interesting. We can see right here, right, you know, your 9 fans that you've got right there. Really cool kind of setup right here where you can see how this is integrated, where you've got your course, your distro, you've got of course your pump, right? That's going into your graphics card, and then you're going into your CPU, and then you can see right here this cool exchanger, kind of how it loops in through this. This is pretty cool vibe too right here, where you also got some translucent right tubing, which I think adds in, it kind of does a little bit of tie into the GPU block as well. That for me is maybe the only thing, like I'm a little bit torn. Like I like that look, but like I almost feel like I see this where I almost feel like I would create a little bit more continuity to just see the soft tubing come through here. But I get where kind of maybe having a hard tube right here works, right? Because it's just rigid, right? And it's that short kind of point-to-point connection, right? But ultimately it still looks great and it looks really nice. No RGB on the DRAM, which I think works actually. I think actually that kind of complements the kind of the lower key vibe, and definitely with the TUF Gaming board, it's definitely in vibe there too, because the TUF Gaming board has essentially almost no lighting on it right there. Like the block choice, where you got of course that high performant block design, right, where you're not focusing on lighting, it's all about performance, right? Let's see right here. So overall execution is absolutely beautiful. What do you think about immersion cooling for PCs, not just industrial and mining rigs? We actually talked about a little bit about that when we talked about one of our servers that was implementing new types of immersion cooling. I think it's an exciting technology, and I think there actually could be a viability for it even within normal DIY systems. If we could have kind of chassis or certain designs kind of purpose built for that intent, you could kind of sell it as kind of a focused option. It gets kind of interesting. There's definitely, I think, elements in terms of how you have to account for the visual presentation and the setup experience, but I think it could be actually as an option for kind of certain enthusiast oriented builds. I think it's pretty cool, pretty interesting. I like this. H2O Computers, this system hits my artistic itch, right? And then we've got Holy Fans Batman, right? Yeah, so I agree with what Oops My Bad notes here, is that soft tubing even lets you pack more onto a smaller space, not having to worry about bends and such. 100%, yeah. I'm a big fan, right? This is a cool thing. Michael goes, reminds me somehow of the Tartarus from Doctor Who. It's pretty interesting, right? Michael notes, very interesting build. I think the cables is what gives that abstract look. Yeah, I definitely agree, right? It does have a little bit of a different vibe in that respect because it goes with that soft tubing setup, right? And I think the cool thing is just how you orientate the build. It has just a different vibe when you look at it as opposed to a traditional system that's kind of fit within a chassis. The fact that it's kind of in this V axis and you kind of can look at it in different ways looks pretty cool. And those fixed fans are definitely just a huge focal point, right, to give you this a different kind of vibe and look to the system that I think is very cool, very distinct. And of course, this is all going to entirely change up the moment you went to a different color, right? If you went to white, if you went to red, you went to green, you would immediately get a different vibe. Of course, keeping all the tubes black and everything else black is an immediate contrast point and entirely works. The only part that's a little bit off right here is it does look like there's probably a coolant that's blue in there for this, but overall it could still definitely work. But definitely it's vibes for me. I really do just like kind of this like semi kind of like industrial machine kind of engine, kind of just high performance kind of vibe thing kind of going off, and it's well executed, well implemented, right? And it's definitely on that performance kind of delta, right? And so I think HBO Computers, who definitely you can see it kind of mirrors the design approach. I love that he also gave it to me in no RGB lighting, and it even looks cool like that. Now here you got that heavier flash, but you can imagine just not having that heavier flash, it just looks cool by itself to me. I know some people don't like having that full kind of exposed look, but I like that. I like seeing kind of those nice beefy heat sinks that you see on the TUF Gaming board. I love being able to see that nice actual those fittings, and I do think the choice to not go with like black fittings right here, seeing actually some contrast where you got the silver, the black, the silver, and the black, I think all of that works through. And we can definitely see right here that the coolant that is used in there is a blue coolant, so he went with the blue in terms of the core color scheme, and that entirely works for me. So overall, that is the Aero Cube, and that's his overall setup. So very cool setup. He positions it there in the corner. That's definitely a vibes, man. It's a very cool build. Let me go ahead and put in maybe 2 images here so we can kind of get a sense of, yeah, 2 different looks there. And I will bring up his submission form to see what we got. So give me 1 second here. All right, so this is going to be, again, from William Moore, and what do we got here? So William Moore is not his first build. What does the build have a theme? Overkill open chassis that was water cooled. What are 3 words used to describe your build? Is a unique cube design. Definitely, I would agree with that. Does your build have a name? The Aero Cube. So in terms of the core hardware, he's got the Squid Labs chassis. So that's the chassis that he's utilizing. Then a TUF Gaming X670E plus gaming Wi-Fi board. He's then running a Ryzen 7 7800X 3D series CPU. He's then running G-Skill Ripjaws S5 memory, 6000 MT CL32, so some night tight timings, high spec memory right there. He then has a TUF Gaming 4090. So when we're talking about what's the graphics card that makes more sense to put a block on, he used a TUF Gaming, which makes sense, as opposed to a Strix card where a huge part of the value is the milled vapor chamber design and that higher end thermal solution. Although the thermal solution on the TUF Gaming is still really, really nice as well, but it makes most sense to block it. So yeah, TUF Gaming 4090 OC is what he has there. PSU, he's got a 1350 watt ATX 3.0 power supply GF3 from Thermaltake. Then he's got, let's see, 2 terabyte PCIe NVMe M.2 SSDs, another 4 terabyte PCIe NVMe M.2 SSD, and then a 512 gigabyte PCIe NVMe M.2 SSD. So that's the cool thing, is that board can support 4 M.2 SSDs, so he's using it. X670E has huge number of PCIe lanes, so no issues there. Then in terms of the pump, 2 pumps, AlphaCool VP 755. Then he's got the AlphaCool D5 dual top plexi for the pump top. The distro is a Fantex D140 distro. The reservoir is a Monsoon MMM-RS 150. 2 bits power hexagon 34 as well. For the fittings, they're all AlphaCool HF, and then of course on the soft tubing, and then on that hard tubing side that I noted, right, so that's there here on the front, right, for the hard tubing, that's all 14 millimeter hard tubing. Radiators, the AlphaCool Nexus, right, the XT45, right, which that's of course allows you to have all those fans on there. Then for the fans, he's got the RTX Bionics P120s. I should see if we could set them up, maybe get them to replace them with some TUF Gaming fans. The TUF Gaming fans even have much better bearings and actually even better static pressure. So maybe we can do that. Maybe we'll talk to him, see if we can send him out some of those. Bits power digital thermal sensor on there, and then EKWB, EKZMT soft tubing throughout, right? So overall budget for the build was about $5,000. What was he most proud of is the unconventional layout. Is there anything that he would change about the build? Is he would like to add a PCIe NVMe Gen 5 M.2 base SSD. How long did it take him to build a system? About 16 hours. And it's mostly used for gaming. He likes to do Call of Duty, Destiny 2, some Forza, as well as actually some emulation for older games like Super Mario. So his favorite function or feature on the ASUS side, he's a huge fan of just the TUF Gaming 4090. It's an absolute beast for graphics card, which of course is definitely true. Overall, man, gets a thumbs up. Very, very cool build. It's fantastic. I'm digging it, right? HO computers, yes, you are. I think you are correct. But actually, I think on the coolant wise, I think it is actually blue coolant, because on the distro, right, when there's no RGB lighting, we could actually see the blue coolant right there. Ken notes, definitely sick build. I would definitely agree, right? David James says, David James, if he just bought it, I think he should be okay, because I think those had a retrofit based connection, a retrofit bracket that was included inside. As a precaution though, you can definitely still reach out to the service support team and they should be able to check with your service number. But if you just purchased a recent one, at least if I remember correctly, all of the AI coolers did have a retrofit packaging where they included that in the box, so you should be entirely okay. So you should be good to go. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap it up, I think, with one last build, guys. Go ahead and get it right here. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second here, and we'll see what we got go. All right, so what is going to be the last one here? So, what are we going to go with? All right, this one, I think we're going to finish it up with I'm not sure how to pronounce this. This is going to be from Zadlip Mods. Not sure I'm saying that correct, but amazing build. The work speaks for itself. Hopefully I said this correct, but let's go ahead and take a look at it right here. This is pictures from his friend Jay's gaming build, so Project Aurora. So I believe the name for this build should be Project Aurora. So let me go ahead and add this in here. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this build. Oh, all right. So definitely it's got some cool vibes going on here. So keeping in the water cooling theme, I'm really digging the overall look and feel that we've got here. So the purple and the green, absolutely a fantastic color combination. You know, of course, anybody that's a fan in the graphic novels and comic books knows kind of that Joker color scheme has worked for a long time. It just has an automatic color blocking effect, which helps to kind of bring out the color tones within each one. So it's really cool. And then you have that black just works as a natural contrast for everything else, and a little bit of that iridescent lighting from the natural kind of RGB illumination that you have there from the purple is also adding a little bit to the conversation as well. So really, really cool vibes just right off the bat. Some really cool actually runs right here in terms of this kind of layout. So this is pretty interesting because of course we have a non-traditional kind of layout configuration here, and that's kind of been the course of what we've seen today with some different kind of options, right? So here we've got the motherboard, but you can see you've got a really nicely implemented riser cable. And so Mike, I know from here, as well as some other people in the groups, have done some interesting type of builds in this route where so they've gone to different kind of layouts and different configurations. So you can see right here the riser cable going actually down, and what you see is actually it's going over here because this is where the graphics card is located. So normally when we're talking about graphics card, we see it either horizontally mounted or like vertically mounted, but this is pretty cool because it creates kind of a more symmetrical flat balance to the entire kind of look and feel of the system. Allows you to have those tubes create kind of some inherent depth and contrast to the build, which is pretty interesting. And they go pretty much the entirety of the top down to the middle, down to the bottom, which you wouldn't really be able to do if you had, of course, that vertical run, the vertical placement for the graphics card. And then, of course, you've got that stat display, which is pretty cool. I'm torn where like part of me wishes I maybe could see actually the res and then also maybe the IO section of the board, but definitely the stat display adds a really cool dynamic, which I think is really interesting. So at the end of the day, I got no qualms with it there. I think it looks really nice. Some really nice bends and runs that we're going to see here throughout this build that looks really nice. Of course, just layout work is really cleanly executed. I'm loving the overall color schemes right here with the purple cabling, the nice kind of combs right there that we've got. We can see our ROG STRIX board right there is as much as we're going to see on that IO shroud. So that's a little bit, I think, of where I was saying I'd love to maybe have seen that side right there. Ken goes, is there any loss in performance if you have long riser cables? So that's a good question. In our testing, we haven't generally seen a generally degradation in performance. It's been pretty close. We have seen some cases where you can sometimes actually have a little bit of loss. The bigger issue that we tend to find is actually there's a much higher increase in variability in terms of signal driving quality. So certain motherboards have certain read drivers that are built onto them, which help to maintain the performance of the PCIe signaling. And what we find is sometimes they don't work well with certain graphics card and certain riser cable combinations. And there's also EMI, so electromagnetic interference, that plays a part. This is just a general pain point that exists for riser cables in general and going with certain types of system configurations. So having this type of system and having a riser cable, especially at length, does increase the probability you will have more problems. You could have more signal dropouts. You could have more variability in the system stability of performance, even initialization issues between reboots. There can also be some odd kind of variability when you talk about overclocking certain buses. So there are more issues, but overall, if everything is optimally done, you should effectively be able to mirror the same performance. But definitely the most reliable, consistent, and best performing configurations are going to be a natively installed no riser cable configuration. But generally in our testing, we found that generally the performance is parity, assuming all things are well executed and are handled. Okay. So HOS Computer says he's got to run, but awesome tube layout on this system. Thanks for the stream, JJ. Have a great weekend, everyone. Right? Is that a water block on the back panel? It's so cool in terms of the look for whatever it is. Yeah. So definitely, let's go ahead and continue to take a look right here. So definitely some really cool stuff. So we can actually see right here. So here's the large block. It's not a mono block. It's just a large CPU block, which has got a little bit more illumination onto it, which is pretty cool. So it gives it this lit vibe, which is cool because you see some lighting right here. You see a little bit lighting right here, and it kind of flows a little bit into the heatsink, which is nice. You of course got the two DIMMs right there, which is optimal for of course DRAM scaling. And then you can of course see right here the graphics card, which is parallel with the motherboard, and that's definitely where the interesting layout is. And then you've got some cool kind of depth to the overall layout configuration, where you've got the tube runs that go here, then another layer that goes above that, right? And then your other tube runs right here, and then back here that's some pretty cool stuff that's going on. So it's very subtle because it's really cleanly implemented, really cleanly laid out. So definitely some props here, some nice work that's been done to give you a really clean and well laid out system. I mean, it's impressive because, again, you're not really seeing a lot of the cable work. There's a lot of stuff that's just been hidden and balanced in here. Again, these runs and these bends are also quite nice and clean and consistent, where you're not seeing anything kind of, a little bit wonky in terms of kind of how they're spaced out or how they're laid out. Kevin notes, really great color scheme and clean. He goes, now I see that the GPU is on a water block. Yeah, so that's where I was talking about in the very beginning, right? Where it's not in that traditional horizontal or vertical implementation, right? So here's your pump, right? There's your CPU block, and there's the GPU. And that's where that question came in terms of the riser cable, where even it's very subtle. You don't see that riser cable because right here he's using, of course, that pump and that reservoir to kind of hide that riser cable from coming down, and then it kind of goes all the way over there, right? And then I love it even when we take out all the lights, right? When we just kind of drop it out and we just look at the build by itself. Really, really slick, really nicely done. It's very, very cool vibes, right? So it's a really cool system. I'm loving the look and feel on it. Let me go ahead and go to the system information right here that I have for it. So give me 1 second. So full specs on this build, let's see right here. So yeah, final pics of my friend Jay's gaming build, Project Aurora. he completed this build for him, and so he's going to actually be taking this. Wow, this guy's going to be taking this to a LAN party. That's pretty crazy. So in terms of the actual CPU, it's a 13700KF, an ROG Strix Z790-F gaming, 32 gigabytes of G-Skill Trident Z. And that's going to be 6,000 MT memory. He then has a 4080, which is going to be water cooled in terms of the graphics card that's there. 2 terabyte Crucial P3 Plus PCIe NVMe Gen 4 M.2 SSD. A Thermaltake Tough Power 1000 watt with custom sleeved cables. Yeah, those cables look fantastic. The purple, I mean, absolutely, they did a fantastic job with the color theory on here and just balancing out the placement, the fitment, and kind of just the overall layout. It's really, really well balanced to be able to give you that kind of that white, that green, that purple, and then that natural contrast that you get from the black components. Beautiful job there. That's all inside of an O11 Dynamic Evo. Then you've got, of course, the Uni fans, which are, of course, supplying, of course, the cooling for, of course, the rads. Then Barotech, right, is being used for the LCD there. That's on the left-hand side. And then it's pretty much Biski, which you don't generally see in too many of our showcases, as far as pretty much the custom loop with also dual 360mm radiators. So overall, man, gets a thumbs up. It's a great looking build, unique layout. And just, you know, the fit, the finish, and polish is definitely present, and it shows that you took the time to put together a great build for your friend, man. Kudos, and thanks for being Team RG and Team Strix. It works really, really well. Some last feedback here from Michael Braun. He goes, looks nice, love the shiny tubes and the color. It's beautifully done. And Tech rounds it out with purple and green works well, right? Yeah, so Miguel, I think gives a little bit of feedback that I said, right? It would look cleaner without the panel. I think part of the reason why is maybe they're trying to hide a little bit of, maybe that visibility on that riser. I think for me, like I said, the stat panel looks pretty cool, and it's hard to know like what you would play around with. Maybe you could have maybe gone something kind of down here, or maybe even something external. Maybe just propping it out, I think could still be kind of cool. Like this kind of stat panel to me, maybe like USB prop down right here, I think would have been kind of cool. Because the do thing I think would look cool would have been seeing that little IO section and the ROG lit up a little bit, just to give you a little bit of contrast and depth right there. But I think it still looks really cool. I mean, especially too having it purple and green, it helps to tie over the theme and consistency. But I kind of do wish I could see that rad and just a little bit of the ID design right there. But I don't know if you're using a little bit of that space so that you don't see certain other elements. Overall, though, it's really clean, really nicely done, fantastic build, and gets definitely 2 thumbs up from me. So great job, man. Project Aurora, very, very cool. So overall, guys, that wraps up the PCDIY Builder Spotlight. It's been great to be able to showcase some great builds from those in the community. As always, if you guys want to be able to share your builds with us in terms of the PCDIY community, we'd love to feature them. All you got to do is join our PCDIY group and check out the PCDIY Spotlight submission form. Drop your photos in there. Drop us some details on the build so that we can go ahead and talk about it on the stream. We'd love to be able to showcase it. So with that, guys, that wraps up our stream. As always, hopefully you guys have a fantastic Friday night. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay cool. Enjoy your Saturday and Sunday, and as always, we'll see you in the PCDIY group, and we'll see you next week, and best of luck with your builds. Take care, guys. Bye bye.